next item on our work session agenda is an update on future planning considerations for elementary schools. And I see our superintendent, Dr. Rodney Trice, is coming to the microphone.
So thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, cabinet, and the Chapel Hill Carborough community. I've prepared remarks that I'd like to read to help set the context for tonight's discussion and to connect it to the broader conversation we have been engaging in as a community. So this past fall, I led approximately 15 community and staff briefings and listening sessions to share in a transparent and straightforward way the fiscal and enrollment headwinds our district is facing. These are challenges that, quite frankly, that have been building for the better part of a decade. In those conversations, I've emphasized that while we are not in a crisis, we are at a crossroads, and there is a difference. A crisis forces reaction. A crossroads allows for choice. If we act now and if we act together, we can manage declining enrollment and reductions in funding in a way that positions CHCCS to become a smaller, more innovative, and high-quality district, one that continues to reflect our community and the deep values and that deeply values and invests in public education. As was mentioned earlier, over the past 2 years, the board and the administration have already made difficult decisions, particularly as it relates to staffing. Including a reduction in force. Those decisions were not easy, but they were necessary. As reflected in our most recent audit, the district has reversed structural deficit spending and is now in a position to begin rebuilding its fund balance. One of my top priorities as superintendent is to continue that work in partnership with the board and to restore our fund balance to a healthy and sustainable level. At the same time, we face ongoing and emerging risks. Uncertainty at the federal level, the absence of a state budget, the potential revision of the county school funding model, and enrollment projections that suggest continued decline over the next decade. Together, these realities require us to think differently about our long-term infrastructure, staffing, and operational model. Also want to acknowledge the human dimension to tonight's discussion. I've spent much of my career in this district, and I know deeply that this presentation focuses on the fiscal and operational realities before us, not the long history of strong schools, dedicated educators, and communities that have supported them. This is not because those stories don't matter, they matter deeply, but because it is essential that the board and the community fully understand the financial headwinds we face and the urgency of addressing them. This is not a moment to step backward in ensuring the long-term solvency of our district. In our community conversations, we've been clear. CHCCS will need to become a smaller district, both in terms of facilities and staffing. Our goal as an administrative team is to manage this in a way that preserves the high academic standards, programs, and services our community has long valued. Achieving that will require difficult trade-offs, choices that may not feel good today, but are necessary to secure a stable and promising future. Simply put, we need newer schools, which the bond, our recent bond helps us achieve, and we need fewer schools, which centers the advancement of the conversation we began this fall. So our aim tonight is to assist the board in achieving its goal of making a financially and operationally sustainable and equitable decision regarding school closure by June 30. And the way we do this is by grounding our decision in our values and centering the future planning of elementary schools, including potential closures, in transparency, objective decision-making, and fidelity to prior county and facility planning commitments, while ensuring that our board fulfills its legal and fiscal responsibilities and acts in the long-term interests of our students and our district. I want to take a moment to kind of walk us through what our presentation will be this evening, or this portion of our presentation. In just a moment, I'll turn the mic over to Mr. Ciarochi, who will outline where we've been as a community, as a school community. So we'll look at the Wolford Report, our 2024 bond, and the board's 10-year CIP plan. He will then move into where we are now, where we will review some of the information that we shared with our community this fall, including information that Dr. Nathan Dollar shared with us concerning our demographic shifts that we're experiencing in our community, including 10-year projections that were shared at the board retreat in December. And he'll also kind of highlight the school capacity figures that may not have been seen by the board or our community as of yet. He'll then move to our budgetary impacts and savings, and then turn the presentation over to me, where I'll talk about next steps, where we'll present the administration with a proposed timeline that will create a path, hopefully, for a decision-making process. I'll then turn it back over to our chair, who then can have a discussion with the board about criteria for selection of schools for closure. Right now, I'll invite Dr. Ciarochi to the podium to get our presentation started.
Thank you, Dr. Trice. Madam Chair, members of the board, staff, and guests here tonight. As Dr. Trice said, I'm going to walk through basically a recap of where we've been, where we are, and then talk about the budgetary impact and savings possibilities that you as a board can consider. And as Mr. Scott had shared, I'll refer to that as a budget lever. You know, what I'm presenting tonight potentially on looking at some inefficiencies that we have primarily at the elementary level within our district. It's not a turnkey solution to the gap that Mr. Scott talks about with the Board of County Commissioners and what they're facing within their budget for the entire county, not just for us in Orange County schools. But it is one where I need to present the facts. They are, in many cases, as you know, with Carolina Demography here at UNC doing some of the projections, they are doing a report for the county that's going to be coming out in March, and we got a preview of that. So it was really at 10,000 feet using regression analysis, but we just want to talk about the trends, just as Mr. Scott talked about the downward trend financially. Unfortunately, I'm going to be presenting the information you've seen with the downward trend at the elementary level within our district over a period of time. So my presentation tonight is not to really be about doom and gloom, though it can be read that way. It's really just basing the facts and showing it so that you can make the best informed decision and with the fiduciary responsibilities that you have. So I want to go back, and actually it goes back before 2023, but as you're aware, the Board of County Commissioners by state statute, they are required within the state of North Carolina, as all county commissioners are, to fund the capital improvements, be it new construction, renovation, major maintenance of all public schools, all public K-12 schools. They are charged with that financing. For years, the county has had multiple priorities, and they recognized back in 2022-ish that they had unfunded or not funded successfully when it comes to school maintenance within both school districts that we have here in Orange County. So ultimately, there was a capital studies work group that was created that consisted of board members from Orange County Schools, Chapel Hill Carborough Schools, as well as Orange County Commissioner representation, and then staff members from each representative bodies that came together really to look at the needs, knowing that for both school districts, close to 50% of the school portfolios between both districts were greater than 50 years of age, and there were multiple cases where there were major catastrophic failures in schools where either air conditioning, roofs had to be addressed, and it was more of a reactive approach. So the committee was tasked to try to develop a plan, at least a strategic fiscal plan, of how to overcome the challenges that they were faced with over a 10 to 15 year period. But you know, I can get up there and I can advocate for our school district. Orange County Schools can, but the county felt for the citizens, because we're going to advocate and for our own needs, they needed to have an objective, independent body come in. So ultimately, there was an RFQ that went out in Wolpert, which is a company that does this kind of work, came in, and they were tasked to look at the assets of our buildings, given the age, but also to look at the space utilization, looking at enrollment trends, and then actually how the buildings were being used in the classrooms. So it wasn't just looking at individual buildings. It was a comprehensive facilities assessment where the planning effort was designed to help Chapel Hill Carborough Schools and Orange County Schools develop a long-term plan, because Orange County shares very similar statistics when it comes to decline in enrollment, just as we do, and their portfolio parallels. So with that being said, the study really looked at educational adequacy, which was a new term for the commissioners, but it's basically, you look at a school that was built in 1958, which we have here in our district, that's still being used daily, and the size, the parameters, the design of the room is not consistent with current DPI standards, best design practice standards for educational facilities, and very different than what we see in some of our newer schools, be it Northside Elementary, or even, I'm going to call it a newer school, but when you look at Rashkis, Morris Grove, Scroggs, those schools are pushing 20 years of age in some cases. Those are new when we compare to some of our older schools that were built in 1958, 59, 1960. So they really looked at that, and I'll talk a little bit further in the presentation about why that was important, because, you know, obviously the question that continued to come up was, do you renovate or do you replace? And what I want to say is that with the building assessments, Wolpert did a just-in-time assessment because their goal was to develop a strategic financial plan so that the county could better prepare. And I'll walk through some of the levers that they utilized in order to do that. So the first thing, and again, this is a slide that you've seen, but they used what's called a facility condition index. And that's basically a percentage of what does it cost to invest in a building versus replacing a building. My biggest disclaimer here is the facility condition index was not the indicator to determine if a school should be closed or replaced or rebuilt, whatever term you want to use. It was really to give a snapshot. And what we found with facility condition indexes is that Wolpert came back and said our oldest schools, if money was no object, because they identified over $1 billion worth of maintenance needs for the county, over $500 million for our district. What they said is that the facility condition index is going to determine where the needs are for your schools that are 30 to 40 years of age, not the older schools. They use the age of the school to determine the prioritization when it comes to schools that should either be replaced or potentially they would say school closure in their report. Age was the biggest determinant. But what it did help us in building the fiscal case for the amount of money the county needs to invest over 10 to 15 years is that when you looked at schools such as Carborough High School, East Chapel Hill High School, you saw that they had very high facility condition index ratings. And it was because those schools are not over 50 years of age. It's because they're at a life cycle point where the roof, the HVAC for very large buildings had to be replaced, which had substantial cost. But that cost doesn't mean that because you have to spend, I'll make up a number here, but $30 million at a high school, that you would close that school, because that school still has good bones in it. It has life to it. So we use that as a tool to build the case that either you have to, Wolpert would say, either you have to take a building out of the inventory or you should replace it. but you need to put your ongoing maintenance money into the buildings that remain, that are not replaced. Because, if you go out with a bond and you raise $300 million does not replace, when it's split between two districts, it doesn't get you that far. You still have to work with the schools that children and staff are going into each and every day that are not being impacted by a bond that may come out every 5 or 6 years. So in the building assessment, and this is just a slide that just kind of shows you how they work their way down holistically. We looked at all of the schools in the inventory, and again, these are in alphabetical order, but you can look at them, and ultimately there'll be a slide that kind of shows you the age. But it came back to where the buildings that had the greatest needs for a 10-year period consisted of Carrboro, Ephesus, Estes Hills, Frank Porter Graham, Bilingüe, Glenwood, Sewell Elementary, and then Colbreth and Phillips Middle School. And you probably recollect that during the pre-bond presentations, the consultant, Wolpert, prioritized Colbreth's replacement over Phillips. And we came back and we demonstrated that there were assets within that facility that gave that school greater life. So you as a board acknowledged and said that if money was ever available, we would prioritize Phillips over Colbreth based upon need. So ultimately, in the end, and I will show this later, but the bond plan consisted of the schools that had the greatest needs, which were Carrboro, Estes Hills, and FPG, out of which there were still 3 additional schools that were on the high need list, and those are Ephesus, Glenwood, and Sewell. And then again, I don't want to leave out Colbreth and Phillips, but tonight's presentation is really about elementary schools, because when we start looking at student capacity, you'll see where the inefficiencies are in our district, and it's at the primary level, not the secondary level. So at the same time, the Board of County Commissioners who commissioned this report, they weighed in and made a lot of decisions as far as the direction that they wanted both school districts to head in, both boards to head in. And primarily because they're the ones charged with the funding, and they know that there are far greater needs than they have means. So when they developed this and they saw the proposals, because Wolpert was asked to provide 4 options based on different funding commitments established by the county. It wasn't a blank check report. It was, here's a scenario where there is $100 million, $250 million, $500 million. What would you recommend if you only had that limited pot of money? It was not, here's a blank check, just tell us what you need, because that's really not realistic. But the report kind of shows you that basically, when it comes to replacing schools, age does play a predominant factor in what you would consider first, second, third, and fourth. Unless we as a district had done some major improvements for a variety of reasons in the meantime that might put a younger school ahead of an older school, because maybe you had to replace the roof and you still had a lot of life to that roof, or you just recently had to replace the air conditioning school-wide. So we had a little of that, but predominantly it is the age. So the commissioners ultimately felt confident that they could fund a $300 million, I'll call it a stimulus or a bond, right, to help begin funding where they were not funding. And I would be remiss to say that before the bond, the county was providing deferred maintenance money to the districts to a tune of about $9 million a year for us over a course of about 3 to 4 years. So it wasn't as if they weren't funding, but that money was being spent at a very fast rate. Once we got out of the pandemic and we were able to get more steady pricing and consistent labor, districts, we started spending that money really in 2022 and spent the course of it over the course of 3 fiscal years. So in doing so, when they adopted the bond and they felt that that was a good sell to the citizens here in Orange County, they also wanted to develop a framework of how we would optimize the plan that Wolpert provided, so we could balance where there are inefficiencies with major costs and expectations that existed. And their framework prioritized replacing old facilities with new facilities and improving the educational adequacy of the school buildings versus renovating. So the Wolpert report talked about renovating. The commissioners came back and said, why would you renovate a building and put, say, 60% money into a renovation, but then in the end, it still looks like the same school. The spaces inside look the same, but it may have new finishes, new HVAC system, new electrical, new technology infrastructure. but the spaces are inadequate based upon the DPI standards. So in their mind, if we're only going to have limited funding with bonds that our county can support, we want you to replace over renovation. So that was the direction that you as a board were provided from the people who appropriate the funding on a capital level. And again, they approve appropriation. They don't approve projects. That is your role. But again, for them to appropriate, you have to follow the guidance of who is funding that at that level. So ultimately, the bond was approved November 24. There was about just over a 67% approval rating, most of which came from the town of Chapel Hill and Carrboro when you look at it. But it was a very strong support, as has historically been within our school district in previous bonds. So when you look at the pre-bond plan of where we landed, what you see here are basically, I kind of go from green, yellow, red, because that's what Wolpert did at the time. This is very similar of where, and again, it's where we landed. You'll see that basically all the schools from the bottom, which is the newest, Chapel Hill High School, up to about McDougal, are all in green, and they go up to about 30 years of age. And I will tell you, even Chapel Hill, that is a brand new building, there were major components of that building that were not replaced. They were not touched. So even though it's a brand new school from the outside, the auditorium, the gymnasium, and the cafeteria is the original core infrastructure for when Chapel Hill, when we had consolidation of the merging of the two schools from Lincoln and Chapel Hill, and they built out there on the current campus. So there is still deficiencies with that school, and I always have to say that because those are things that are going to come back, and you guys are going to come back and say, why are we putting money into Chapel Hill when we replaced it? Like, we didn't. But what you'll see is the yellow and the red is basically schools that are 50 years of age or older, and that's where you get the schools that are on that list that I had shared just previously. We do have the Lincoln Center, which is the building that we're in right now. So back in 2023, a building was 74 years old. There are components in this facility that are that age. But again, our money is not to go into an admin office. It is to go where the children and the teachers are best served. So we have prioritized that money is not to go into major infrastructure for support services. It's to go into our schools. So ultimately, again, it left 5 schools remaining that are on that priority list. And, the thing I will say about the Wolpert plan, the Wolpert plan is good as the moment that it was put out, but it changes. The projects that they identified for maintenance, we know that we're in a reactive mode, not a preventative mode with maintenance. So even though they may say that a project needed to be done at a school, we know that even though they said that it needed to happen, we have something else that surfaces, and we're having to redirect money to respond as we go. Kind of just-in-time management, which is what you have to do when your funding is limited as it is today. So the guidance that the commissioners gave us with our capital investment plan, which is an annual plan that comes to you to review, and you approve, and you submit it to the county for their consideration, and then ultimately they approve that plan along with the other departments within the county that also have CIP plans. Their goals were to replace aging school facilities with modern structures, to address all high-priority facility needs, such as infrastructure repairs and safety improvements, but also to enhance educational adequacy to support the evolving instructional needs. So their goal is when you approve a plan and senior staff goes over to present, or when we have our joint meeting and you are presenting it, if we deviate from replacing aging school facilities with modern facilities, we're going to have to demonstrate why we're not addressing educational adequacy when we're asking them to invest and to have our citizens have an increase in tax rate and to sell debt. That's the piece that they're saying to us, do your best to follow our guidance because we have to be able to balance this with the other needs that the county has to be able to manage. So the reason I'm showing this, and I know for the folks in the audience, this is hard to see. This is a CIP that we submitted that ultimately was the county commissioners approve in June of each year. I show this, and it is available, PDFs of all of this from the date that this was approved back in April. I wanted to show you that for the bond, it shows, Mr. Scott talked about the pay-go money and how that potentially reducing the pay-go on the county side could be a lever that they have to employ to overcome their budget gap. Originally, of those who were very active with the bond, it was a $300 million bond with $100 million in pay-go over 10 years. And at the time, we were about a 60-40 split when it comes to what percentage goes to our district versus what goes to Chapel Hill. So we were out there basically saying that, we're going to use about $175 million of the $300 in the bond, and we were going to use that to prioritize to replace up to 3 schools, and here was the order that we prioritized them at. But we also knew that there was PAYGO money, which is basically cash that the county generates from a percentage of tax that the citizens pay. So the tax rate is impacted in order to pay PAYGO. And that's where Mr. Scott had talked about how they didn't have the confidence to be able to raise the tax rate at the level that they had, I'll say, promoted in the bond when the reality came and they saw what was heading ahead with, or using those the trade winds as an example. They knew they had to pull back on that. But the ideal was that we would use the PAYGO, the cash money, to pay for the design portions of our replacement schools, which is what we're currently doing with Carborough Elementary today. By the fact that they did not approve that PAYGO, we're using bond money for that. But the concern of what the commissioners may or may not have to do with PAYGO in the future is what I want to talk about tonight, because the bottom slide is the capital money that the district has historically received annually from the county. And last year, it's about $4.2 million. This year, it'd probably be about the same once we get the information from the county. So if we don't have the PAYGO money to go with maintenance, to help cover that in the years out after the design portion is done, then we really only have $4.2 million to address the high priority maintenance needs that are within the projects that the Wolpert plan had initiated and our staff bring to you. So I say that to say, for us from an efficiency standpoint, if we know that the amount of PAYGO long-term could be impacted or lesser in amount, it's even more so that if we have anything within our system that we can not have to maintain, that is money that we could redirect to schools that have just as great of a need. And those would be the schools that are in the 30 to 50-year range and being able to address major roofing or HVAC. Yes.
I just want to ask a question. I know it's hard for other people to see. That's why I want to call out this number. In year one for Carborough Elementary, and I know it's not complete in terms of what we spent, but we have spent a significant amount of this. How much is, I see $5.3 million already.
Yeah, so for the design portion, there's 3 components to the design portion that was budgeted. The first was for the project management firm, Turner Townsend Heery, that you approved. That was about just over a $1 million commitment for, again, a $53 million budget, total budget. We awarded a contract to an architect to be able to start the design. That was about $3.2 million. And then we're entering into the construction manager at risk, construction delivery method, and there is some construction services that come from the contractor before they develop their guaranteed best price. So we have committed, or will have committed, the good portion of that design money within the next 30 days. But we've already done about 2/3 of it already.
Right. So if we were to say not Carborough and then try to start over with a different school, that's not. We would have to then spend another $5 million if it's not Carborough.
Yeah. If you were, say that again?
So if we were to say, oh, well, not Carborough, if we were to backtrack as a board and say, we've changed our mind, we're now going to pick different schools to do, we would lose $5 million. Because it's not like they can port the information to another. You wouldn't
lose the whole, but you would lose the portion that's been expended contractually. And we would have to have just, we have the ability to be able to do that, but there would be monies that we would have spent that we would not get back. So my recommendation at this point, we've moved, because we've talked about inflationary measures, time is money. We've worked through the interlocal agreement, and that will be coming to you shortly. That's a project where inflation will catch up to where that, the longer we spend on a project that we started, the greater that will be in the end when the bid date comes. And that's if any project that exists. It's not just with Carborough. So my recommendation, if you were to ask me today, I would not waste any expended money that we've done, but we have not expended any money on any other schools that were approved in your capital investment plan, if that answers your question.
Thank you. Go ahead, George. Go ahead.
Al, can I ask you a question about the PAYGO funds? Because it gets confusing. Pay as you go. Pay-go is the voters approved a $300 million bond.
Yes.
Be split between 2 school districts. And then the county commissioners said, we'll give another $100 million of pay-go funds over the next 10 years. Basically $10 million a year, which you've been explaining. But so the reason when they retract the money, because they don't have it, even though they intended to have it, not blaming anybody, is they had to start borrowing money from the bond. Is that correct?
Only for what has been expended.
Yes.
So it's not as if they've got a loan for $300 million.
Right. They
It's
took
only
$5 million.
Yeah, it's only for what we've expended.
Right.
That's correct.
For the sake of purpose here. So we're really looking at a significant issue right now, where the initial bond, we were really thinking $400 million for 2 school systems over 10 years. We're really maybe down to $300 million.
Potentially. I mean,
Or whatever.
The county pulled back on the pay-go funding for this current fiscal year.
Right out of the gate.
I can't determine. Yeah, I can't
Right.
determine what they would do in the future. That would be their
I
body.
understand, but
I think you
they're-
have to be aware of it, or at least cognizant of the fact that it could happen again. And when they talk about a delta, we at least need to take that into consideration as we are planning our major maintenance projects.
So when can we get from you, and I don't mean immediately or anything, but like we have $175 million in bond money for our share for Chapel Hill Carborough out of the $300 million. When will we know how realistic that is to build 3 schools out of that money?
Yeah. I believe that realistically, you have to wait for the elected body that appropriates the money to make those ultimate decisions, or to take action publicly to be able to say this is the position that we have to take. I don't want to put the cart before the horse with another elected body, but I mean that's there. But I think we just have to be cognizant of that as we move forward. But again, they've talked about potentially reinstating that money over time to where it's not going to zero out. They're going to have to decide what is that balance of what they can manage or not, because there was a commitment that was made to the community, and they know that there is a pressing need. And the longer they, I'll say, kick the can down the road when it comes to funding major maintenance in our buildings, they know that that's just going to be problematic. So, they've got a tough task at hand, because they've got, obviously there's competing interests, but they know that there's a need, and they'll have to decide that. But we just have to be cognizant of it, as Mr. Scott has said. That is a lever. There's only 2 levers that they can approach with us, because the citizens voted on the bond. So that is a go, the bond funding itself. And that's why it's a general obligation bond, and it was done through an election. But you still have the pay-go, and you still have the local funding that they do. Those are the 2 things they have control over.
So do you recommend that this be part of the discussion now with them? Or do we just wait and see over the next year, 2? I mean, do you have a recommendation for us as we?
My recommendation is that for Mr. Scott and I, that we continue to dialogue with county budget and finance staff, and ask them to communicate with us when there are considerations that their elected body and the manager are both considering to put forward. But for us just to keep informed and to monitor that, because the retreat was just giving them an overview. But they are going to have, as any elected body, they're going to have to take some steps to be able to start addressing that as they go through their own budget development. And that's what we have to continue to monitor.
Thank you.
Right. So jumping right into just where we are, and this is information that you have had presented for years. We've had there's 2 institutions that provide tomography here in the state of North Carolina through public research institutions. That is North Carolina State University and through University of North Carolina, i.e. Carolina Tomography is the division, I guess. So we've received information from both entities over the course of years. And this was the county contracted with Carolina Tomography this year. So in doing so, and I'll just briefly go over, Dr. Trice started with over 15 community-wide meetings where he presented the forecasts, the trends when it comes to student enrollment that the county had been tasked and that we had been seeing for years. He wanted to get input. He also talked about where do we want to see our district, knowing that potentially there is a student decline that is going to continue. How can we be a high-performing district, just a smaller district, but providing the same quality, if not more quality, at the same time, but also having to address some of the inefficiencies that we have. And again, the topic I'm here tonight to talk about is just one budget lever that's there. So at the board retreat for you back in December, Carolina Demography pretty much showed you nothing new that you had not seen for many years as a body, not each of you individually, but just as a body, right? To where the trend has been downward from 2015. And what Carolina Demography was to say is, okay, I was here the year before at your board retreat, came back this year, and basically said that based upon, going back about 5 years and using regression analysis, we don't see the trend changing. And that was really the information. But he provided a lot of information, which I'll go over, about the reduction of students with our ADM over the course of 6 years. He talked about the number of live births. As you all know, he said this is not unique to our district. It's not unique to our state, our nation. It's our world. There are just fewer children there's fewer live births, period. It's not about just people not coming into our community. It's just period. And districts across our country today, many of them are talking about this now, that we're not talking about it before because they're seeing the same trend as he described. But this just kind of gave a totality of looking at from the 1920 through this current school year. We've seen a reduction most recently, which is the most impactful, about 1,545 students is what he wanted to show. But he also just gave talked a little bit about the projections and that trend was not stabilizing or going up, that it would continue in doing so. So when you look at the elementary enrollment, and again, that's where he showed that's where your greatest decline was, and I'll get into a little further detail. He talked about the cohort analysis, and this is a very busy chart, but what it basically does is it shows you cohorts that start, say, in 2018, and he projects out to 2035. And you could go further back than 2018, and you're going to see the same progression. But what this chart shows is that over in the past and in the future, the number of children that are entering our district at the kindergarten level continues to go down. Each year, the number goes down. So if you look at the chart from the top left, and you'll see 2018, 855, I believe, students. As you project down, you will see all the way down, it goes down to just under 600 students in 2035. Again, that is a mathematical calculation. We've always said, and he will even say, as a demographer, you can take stock in what I show you for about 2 to 3 years, but beyond that, you just have to continually monitor this. But it does allow you, from a strategic standpoint, you at least have to plan accordingly and not think that something's just going to change in 5 years and enrollment's going to change. There are no indicators that would modify what he has projected. But the unique thing that he shared is, though the incoming enrollment is going down at the kindergarten level, and what he will say is, it's not that kids aren't coming to our district, they're just not being born. He would say that's the predominant reason, and that's nationally, is what he shared with you. But what you see is the cohorts, if you look at the chart and you see where you start in, say, 2018, and you work your way all the way to, say, projected in 12th grade, the cohorts, once you're here and you start with us, you stay with us. So what he was trying to show us is people move to our district in the middle of the year and they stay as a whole, though we do have people who leave. But in the end, there's a gain in the end once you start. And what he wanted to show us is it's that they're just not coming in the kindergarten year. The next piece, and this is something we have talked about, but we just graphically wanted to show you, is, okay, so we see that the trend is at the elementary level. And let me go back. I did want to say the high school levels are strong. So we have lots of underutilized spaces at the elementary level, but then our high schools, they're pretty snug right now. And the phenomena that Dr. Dollar would say is that realistically, you have people who possibly are not coming to our district because of market share. Maybe they're just not being born. But if they are born, they may be choosing other options that the state of North Carolina provides, be it private, charter schools, homeschool, things of other nature. But what he said is that potentially the reason why your high school numbers, and we take we agree with him, is at the high school level, a lot of our parents bring their kids back into public education because at the high school level, there are opportunities and courses and offerings that they're not able to get at a private charter or even homeschooling. So our numbers continue to move in that direction. But I think that was important to show that we do gain over time, but you look at capacity, we're really not looking at the middle schools and the high schools today. We're only looking at the elementary, though he did show that eventually the children of the elementary will matriculate through and that there would be some movement at the middle school level to where there could be some reductions down the road. But at the high school level, if that trend remains the same where people are coming back into public education, and he says it's not just with us, it's across the board, that we would continue to see good utilization of high school classroom space. So going back to elementary, this is just a chart that graphically just shows you the capacity, the building capacity of our buildings versus the enrollment, student enrollment. And what you will see is that the program schools that we have, with the exception of McDougall Elementary, which it does not have a program in it, they are the ones that have the strongest enrollment because they are working through a lottery system. So when you look at Glenwood, when you look at Carborough Elementary, when you look at FPG, when you look at Sewell, those numbers are a lot stronger because there are children that are being accepted and they're filling slots. Whereas, except with McDougall, everybody else, there is imbalance, if you want to call it, or underutilization in the building. So this is just a graphic a way to show that, but to also just to be able to show you that the utilization rate, what you're going to see is the utilization rate today is about 75%. But then ultimately we're projecting that the elementary utilization rate will be downward of 70% in the future. Now, when Wolpert gave their presentation, and you'll probably remember me saying it, they said at that time, in basically 2022-23, we were 80% utilization at the elementary level. And I always said 80%, that was about 1,000 students. On average, our schools hold about 500 each. And I would always say that's about 2 elementary schools right there. Well, that number has increased since even the Wolpert report was done, to where I used to say, let's look at 1 school, not 2, because there could be some fluctuations that the demographers don't hit. Let's be conservative. Now the numbers, it's very compelling that it is 2 schools. Potentially it's moving towards 3 down the road, but it's 2 today. Because, again, I wouldn't trust any demographer beyond 3 to 4 years when it comes to making those decisions. You just wouldn't make a decision today for that immediately. And he agrees to that, so I'm not speaking out of turn. For the elementary capacity enrollment, this was a 10,000-foot analysis where he used, because you'll see that it shows program schools slightly increasing. Well, if we have a cap and the school can only hold but so many, that school's not going to increase because they're controlling the size by the enrollment and the lottery. But just using a simple regression analysis, what was to be taken from this is just the trend. The trend is still more empty seats as you go into 2035. So we showed today about 1,371 seats. Ultimately, it could be up to 1,700 seats. And that's why I threw out there, potentially, it could be 3 schools down the road that are underutilized in totality for our school district's portfolio. So, yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure that this is said at some point, but looking at these numbers, there's quite a range between elementary schools, but I mean, a lot of it has to do with the way that the district lines are drawn, right? So, as neighborhoods ebb and flow, what we drew, 14 years ago when we did the last redistricting, it may not look the same as it does today.
Correct. So, knowing that the last major redistricting was when, I guess, FPG became a program school in the opening of Northside Elementary. Communities age out. There's cycles where families and children, and that does fluctuate over time. And, town planners can talk to you for hours about that. The life, I call it cradle to grave of a community, and then how it recycles. And they can predict how many times it will recycle and do all of that. So there have been fluctuations. So we have some communities where there may be homes where there are people who are, I'll say, 50 years of age plus, where their children maybe are out of school, but they're holding on to their house, and it just hasn't recycled yet, if you want to call it that. So yeah, that's a big piece there, is that there are differences based upon student family movements that have occurred since the last redistricting. So I just wanted to kind of say, so where we are, when we throw out today, we're at about 10,700 students. That really takes us back 20 years ago for our district. That was the last time our district was at that student count, back in 2005, 2006. And at that time, there were 3 less schools in our district. It was Carborough High School, Morris Grove, and Northside. And again, today's enrollment is just a little over the 10.7, depending upon if you look at the principal's monthly report, which number you look at. But again, it's a trend. But it does show you, and what I will say is, the fact that we were at 10.7 and we had 3 high schools back 20 years ago, part of the reason why is that the high school membership has not changed. It's the elementary membership that has changed. The high school still remains strong, and I talked about that phenomenon where parents are bringing their children back into public education. So you can kind of answer to why, because we're not saying that you don't need a high school right now. They're full. But it's just to be able to show that yeah, we've gone back to the same size, student-wise, as we were 20 years ago. So with the budgetary impact, the budget lever that you asked me back in August to bring to you, just to talk about hypothetically of what are the cost savings and the types of cost savings that a district could reap by the closing of a building, period. And we used an elementary school because that's where the conversation has been trending over the course of the past 3 years. So, in the beginning, there's 3 primary reasons that generally school districts have to consider looking at the budget lever of school closure. And that could be the aging, failing facilities where literally the buildings are crumbling. I'm pleased to say that we are not in that kind of disparity when it comes to our buildings. They're old, they've served their life, but they are still functional today. There are other school districts, when it rains, we all see it. I mean, there's water pouring down the walls, there's plaster bubbling, all kinds of crazy stuff, right? The financial pressures, the shortfall with the revenue that's coming in for a district versus what it's expending, that's the biggest. And then you have just declining school enrollment. So we talked about that back in August. And what I presented is just, again, looking at an elementary level of what you could reap when it comes to recurring annual savings, avoided capital investment with major maintenance. I'm not talking about the replacement of schools, just the ongoing major maintenance that you have to continue to invest, and then the potential one-time savings that might occur. So the recurring annual savings was about $1.7 million a year out of your local budget. About $1.4 million of that came from fixed positions in our schools. The remainder was utility and general maintenance costs, not big maintenance, but just fixing small things at the school. Elementary schools are not the energy consumers in our district. It's the secondary schools. So even from an energy standpoint, it's not a lot of money at our elementary schools. They pale in comparison to our middle and high schools because of the amount of square footage and the usage of the buildings, because our middle and high schools are used for greater periods of time. So we talked a little bit about that. About $10 to $15 million on average for over a 5 to 10 year period that you might have to invest, be it roof, mechanical, storm, water improvements on site, sewer replacement, domestic water, all the infrastructure stuff, just like you have if you have an older home that you have to invest in. It's just on a very large scale. And then ultimately I gave you some direction of if you were to close a school and determine that the building needed to be no longer serve the use of the district in any way, shape, or form, that you have the ability, following state statute, and getting permission from the county commissioners, because in order to sell, they would get first right of refusal, but you ultimately could sell that property if the county was not interested in it, and there potentially could be a one-time savings. Though that money and the rules are very specific to that. And, I've publicly said that real property within our school district is at a premium. It's very limited. And any land that our district has, unless there is something that is comparable that you as a board might consider as far as swapping land in some way, shape, or form with the county, I would not recommend ever selling any of our land in our district. And I'm not at a point to say that I would sell any of our buildings, because we've talked about the fact that in our portfolio with the reactive maintenance that we're doing, that one day we could have a catastrophic failure at a school that requires engineering and manufacturing, say, to replace an air conditioning system, and it's in the middle of the school year, and we have to move our kids to another school. So it would be our goal ultimately to consider, if the school was to be closed, could we maintain it minimally in order to use it as a swing space until the time comes where it no longer can serve that purpose. But we've talked about that, and other districts utilize that as well. Wake County does that. They're at a whole different ballgame than we are, but they're having to replace older buildings, and they're having to move kids in order to do that. It does give you that flexibility if you ever had a large-scale facility issue, because I think that we would not want to do switching over to virtual instruction as a long-term possibility, right? We would want to be able to have a building that we could educate our children in.
Go ahead, George.
Al, on this chart here, the $1.7 million per year savings is connected to what Jonathan was presenting with our county commissioner request for annual operating expenses. I think it would be helpful for people to be real clear that when we go every year to the county commissioners and ask for a 3% increase just to stay where we were last year, that $60 million that we were talking about, this is the $1.7 million that would help with that request. The capital funding is another whole issue. It's not in that discussion.
Correct.
So in a sense, we needed to find $6 million. We're getting about 25% here of our total request just for next year.
That's right, and that's why I call it's only one budget lever, but it's not the solution. It's just something for you to consider, because the bottom line is that's money that is being left on the table every year, and that you could maximize your buildings. And again, I say that's easier said than done, and we all recognize that. But it's the idea that when you look at the numbers here, it's very compelling that you at least have to weigh it and to decide what you believe is the best course of action. So this is a slide that I showed as well back in August, but it just kind of puts it into perspective. And again, this is $1.7 million of local funding per year. If you make the decision today, and I'm not suggesting that, but we show in 2026, you would save about $6.8 million. But if the longer you wait, the less of that savings you're able to benefit from. And you see on the chart here, it goes right back down to 1.7. It's just a tool to know. Again, there are a lot of factors that come into play when you consider this, but it is one where, as the county is looking at their structural deficits financially, we're looking at ours. These are things that at least we have to consider. But it just shows you that this is money that could be redirected, that can minimize other reductions within our district where we have greater priorities possibly, right? So talking about budget levers, I felt that I didn't want to speak just in isolation, that this is the only thing that the operations department is just sharing with you. We have worked as a district to look at other current and potential budget adjustments as, reviewing our central office staffing structures, looking at those positions. There's currently, Mr. Scott has talked about, there's been a freeze of 25% on non-personnel budget items, where departments have all had basically a 25% reduction. And then ultimately, Mr. Scott will have to determine if that money needs to go cover the shortfall, how that money needs to be used. There's been discussion about adjusting our staff allocation formulas, reducing expenditures on instructional technology. We've examined district-wide staffing patterns to look for any opportunities in reducing redundancy, consolidating roles where it makes sense. But we also explore opportunities across the board just to look at any existing contracts we have. And are there ways in which we could reduce services? Can we combine services, or even looking at outsourcing certain options? We know when it comes to our costs, the benefits that come along add to the salary. So when you hear someone's salary, there's benefits that come along with that have additional cost. But if there are services out there that can get the job done for less and more efficiently, we've been tasked by the superintendent just to evaluate that. So with that being said, I can answer any questions, but we're at the point where Dr. Trice wants to talk about next steps.
Board members, do you have any questions?
All right, so let's talk about next steps. As I mentioned at the top of the presentation, this section of the agenda really focuses on a proposed timeline that the administration put together for the board's consideration that creates a pathway for decision-making around school closure. I want to say up front, a big part of that is continued community engagement in the same lines as we followed this fall when informing our community about the changing demographics, the declining enrollment, and the budget implications. So for the next 5 or 6 slides, I just want to present that timeline. Be happy to answer any questions, but we'll definitely be seeking board feedback on this timeline. So here we are tonight. As I shared at the top of the conversation, we would ask the board to begin initial conversations that identify the criteria that will inform our future decision about school closure. So we're not asking for a vote, but at some point the administration will need direction to complete its statutory requirement on completing a study regarding school closure. We have a board meeting on February 19th where perhaps we could formally establish that criteria that would give the administration some runway to begin to conduct its study. Moving into March, if we were able to get the criteria, we certainly would want to begin to engage our community, sharing much of what we shared today. It was a bit of a reflection, but it was also a look forward in terms of understanding our school capacity numbers or challenges. Perhaps it is also kind of informing our community what the criteria is for school closure. But it's also to communicate that it's not about impacted schools or schools that may close. If the board decides to close a school or 2 schools, it will impact our entire district because we will have to go through a redistricting process. And so we want to, as we did earlier this fall, help carry our community through what that potentially could look like, but also get feedback on what the needs are concerning redistricting because it will impact all of us. As you can see on the screen, we're proposing 3 in-person sessions, perhaps at our high schools that can hold a lot of our community, 1 virtual. That's an option that we didn't do this fall that I think would have been smart that we could deploy during this cycle of community engagement. We certainly will begin our data collection to inform our recommendation to the board. We want to start that as soon as possible because, our report or our recommendation will be based on the data and the criteria that the board outlines. Moving into April, we'll be kind of quiet because we do need to actually construct the actual recommendation. So using the board's criteria, the data collection, the community input sessions, the history of the reports that we just referenced, we'll need to craft a recommendation, and we're looking at about a month to do so, and using the month of April to do that. In May, the administration would publish its recommendation, May 7th. We feel it's important to publish our recommendation well before the board is asked to be in a position to vote on a recommendation or select a recommendation or perhaps adjust a recommendation. And so it's our intention to publish, our recommendation on May 7th. Our policy as a district requires a public hearing on major decisions that impact our community broadly. We are proposing to have that public hearing on May 21st, and that gives the community a couple of weeks to read through the administration's proposal, but also engage with the board with questions or perhaps alternatives to the recommendation. But at the public hearing, like we've done in the past, there is feedback from the community that happens in a setting much like we have now, where the community is offering their feedback. And then in June, as you can see, if we move from May 21st to June 4th, that's another couple of weeks where we would ask the board to make or take action on the administration's recommendation or an adjustment to a recommendation that the board deems appropriate. But it gives the board a couple of weeks between the public hearing and when we're proposing that the board take action on a recommendation to have discussions. And so the idea is that we wouldn't kind of stack information and decision making back to back, but we wanted to spread it out a little bit. So this is the proposal that we're kind of putting forth. It is it's February right now. Not a lot of time between now and June, but a lot of work to do. And we thought it was important that not only that the board see a timeline and what the proposed actions are, but that we're pretty transparent with our public as well about when decisions are made, when information will be presented as well. Again, this is just another way to kind of look at the timeline. I'm not going to walk through it, but as I mentioned, between now and June is where the bulk of our work will be done. Any action that the board takes will also inform the administration's work for the following year. It's important to recognize that we're not asking that the board consider closure of schools for the next academic year. It would be the following academic year. So I want to make that clear to our public. But I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any feedback concerning the timeline. But we did draft a discussion prompt for the board concerning criteria. Given the financial and enrollment realities we've just reviewed, and with an eye toward the long-term financial health of the district, what criteria should guide decisions about potential elementary school closures? And our staff is prepared to take notes, I know, on that discussion. But, we'll be happy to answer any questions about our presentations, the timeline, and I'll turn it back over to Chair Jenkins for facilitation.
Thank you. Why don't we start with just initial thoughts from the board on the timeline first before we get to the discussion prompt? Ronnie, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation and laying out sort of what has to be true to kind of get us to where we need to be. I would observe this is an extremely aggressive timeline to make all of these decisions to give us enough time to be able to reopen whatever our district looks like in, 18 months, right? And so I'm just going to caution us to build flexibility where we need to, and if we need to pivot, think about what that might look like. Can you all hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. The other thing I would ask maybe the board to consider, and maybe from administration as well, is what are we considering from how many schools? I think it would be impossible to close 2 schools in a year. And so are we talking about 1 school and then coming back and re-engaging the conversation as we assess sort of where we are with enrollment and the financial impact that's left us with? Or sort of what are we considering in the decision that we're being asked to think about today?
Thank you, Ron. Why don't we have other people reflect on the timeline, and can we come back to your question?
I think it impacts the timeline, so I wonder if we could talk about that.
All right. Board members, what are we considering when we think about closure? Is it 1 school over time, right, Ronnie? Right. Or 2 schools? And maybe board members can reflect. Staggered approach. And maybe if board members want to reflect on why. I can start, and you can go, or I can start calling on you. Can't sit quiet on this one, board member. Sorry.
Start calling on people.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Okay, Vicki wants to ask a clarifying.
I'd like to clarify, have a question clarifying with what you're saying to us. What is it administration is bringing to us? What are you asking us to consider? 1, 2 at once, or staggered? What are your thoughts before we need to try to figure out what we need to look at doing?
Well, I don't know that we've, brought anything to the board. When I think about the staggering option, I think we need to think about redistricting. And so if you close 1 school, you have to redistrict the entire district. So if we waited another year and close another school, are we going through another district-wide redistricting? So that, those are considerations and trade-offs that we would have to make as a community. And I haven't yet talked about the rebuilding of schools that we are also underway doing, where we will also have to do another redistricting. So the idea is that we would want to create as much stability as we can in our community when we make these decisions. But again, I just want you to know we haven't brought any plan or consideration to the board concerning.
Do you have a
that.
follow-up question?
Okay, so forgive me for going down this rabbit hole. Oh, God. But in terms of looking at the rebuild and the fact that we need new buildings and are having to potentially close 2 schools, time frame for possible having a new build would be how many years out again?
So we're looking at 3 years. 3 years.
So potentially we could have a new building and around the same time that we need to have 2 schools closed.
No, it's
You
going to
said
be
3
before.
years?
It's going to be before. The new school won't open until 28, 29.
Okay, and you were saying possible the 2 closing 27, 28 with the, so around, I'm saying, we're talking about 2 school years, 1 school year difference in time, right? So around, so we're possibly looking at a new building with 2 schools being closed within a year or 2.
Right.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to get that straight in my head because that can help formulate a different thought.
Go ahead, Meredith.
Yeah, I mean, I actually was going to say something similar to what Vicki said initially, in that, I'm really looking for direction from the administration as to, how far do we need to pull the financial levers to make this work for our district for its long-term stability and sustainability. So I would prefer to close 0 schools.
Yeah.
However, I also recognize financial realities. So I can't really say right now 1 versus 2 without understanding how crucial those 2 data points are to solving our overall issue, because I know that that's really just, as you've pointed out, it's one piece. It's not the entirety of what we need to do to remain solvent.
Certainly it is one piece, but it is a big piece, perhaps the biggest piece when we look at our budget levers. And in the absence of using that budget lever, what I mean by that is closing schools. We still have the responsibility of closing our budget gap. And if we're not going to close schools, then we will pivot toward, where we spend our funding. And as Mr. Scott showed, 83% of our funding is spent on people. So as an administration, we were looking to use closure of schools to create a bit of a runway, knowing that we have to kind of step down our staff, but we want to give them as much time as possible to make life-changing decisions when we do that. So if we decide about, for instance, school closures soon, we are still in the process of developing a staffing plan that's stepped down over the years. But as people leave the district or retire, we can begin to fill those openings right away. And that gives our staff certainty. As opposed to, spending time to think deeply or more long-term about school closures and having to accelerate our step down in staffing plan, which would feel much like the RIF in some ways that we did a couple of years ago. I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question? But looking at how significant our financial gap is, do you think we can achieve it just by reducing personnel? Because when you start reducing personnel, you start impacting our students and our values of a complement of staff that we value as a district, right? There are things that are unique to our district that, as I talk with districts all over the country, they don't have. We have a nurse in every single one of our schools. I've talked to people all over the country. They're like, no. We get a nurse every other day, so hopefully your kid gets sick on the day the nurse is there, or it's going to be a teacher taking care of them, right? And so even if we try to reduce it with staff, I guess my question is, are we still going to find ourselves fiscally short?
Not only, yes, I'm sorry. I mean,
Yeah, no.
so not only fiscally short, but we still haven't dealt with the inefficiency in our facilities. So not only will we kind of focus on staff, and many of the programs and services will be in jeopardy, we're still looking at capacity, 60, 70%, which will get worse as our student population declines. So we'll make a decision about reducing staff, and then we're still going to have to come back to you as an administration to say, we need to deal with these facilities. They're getting more expensive to maintain. We have declining enrollment. When are we going to deal with that? And so our approach as an administration is to deal with facilities first. You saw some of the benefits in terms of allowing us to pool money, shift funding to support the infrastructure needs that are clearly there, but also giving our staff the runway to make decisions about employment. And, quite frankly, keeping them with us
I was going to say that too.
As staff retire or decide to work in other districts or move, that's helpful for us.
Because we're not staffed at 100%, and so that's where, I talk with you,
Yeah.
A lot about, a lot of the inefficiencies when we look at a school that's under capacity. I'm sorry, board members, I jumped you on this one, but I asked this question of, class size, because that's the other thing at play that it's from the state. It's the state law about class size requirements and the tipping point. Like when you hit a certain number of kids in a class, it requires a classroom.
Right.
And so we have some very, very small classes, not because we chose it, but the state yet again has dictated something and not tied dollars to it.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's where, there's an efficiency where we can round out classes, and it doesn't mean that it's a loss of a teacher. It may be, for the sake of our HR department, it may be tipping us to 100% versus sitting at 96 or 98%.
Absolutely. I couldn't add anything to that. And I think Dr. Harris would say, I don't want to speak for her, but the faster she knows that we need to kind of place staff in open position, the better, because it just creates stability across the board. It, eases transitions for staff, because it can be pretty nerve-wracking if you start to name employment categories that may be impacted, but you're not making decisions for 2 or 3 years because,
Sorry about that, board members. Other board members' reflections. I don't know, Meredith, if you wanted to add anything. Okay. Thank you. Okay, board members' reflections in terms of the timing. Go ahead, Barb. Your question.
It's just another question. Isn't there something called spot redistricting where you can just redistrict a part of the district? So I guess, because I think nobody wants to redistrict 3 times in 4 years or whatever, at all. And ideally, we would just do it once. And I remember Mr. Ciarochi not wanting to close a school because he wanted to only redistrict once. He wanted to wait, but we can't. So I guess I don't know. I know we have a policy, 4150, that tries it's like you really should try not to redistrict very much, and especially move kids more than once within elementary schools. But I guess would you really have to? I guess the question is this. Obviously, to me, is connected to redistricting because that's its own cost and its own disruption. And so, you really think we'd have to redistrict even if we just close one school, or the whole district?
Well, yeah, yes. Particularly given some of the programming that's in our schools, we would have to decide, because we're not proposing to the board that we would eliminate any of our programs in our schools. So we would, have to find a school to place those programs into, and which also may display students. So there would be a bit of redistricting. I don't know if Mr. Ciarochi could add anything to that. I know he's done this a number of times. So.
Yeah, so there are 2 variables, I think, for your question about spot redistricting. let me talk about programs first. So if we have 4 programs in our district, the children in those programs are randomly selected, and they come from all over. So for a demographer who's looking at redistricting, you kind of have to look at kind of like a regression analysis of the past of where have the children predominantly come from within our district and kind of hedge that. But even when you have programs, you have to lower your capacity to deal with over and under, because you just don't know where parents are going to move or where their kids are going to land. So you already have some inefficiencies when you have a district that has programs versus not having any programs and every school is just residential. The spot redistricting, ultimately you could look at, and I have to make this up, but you could, if there were 2 schools and you're able to separate them geographically, where you might have an eastern redistricting and a western redistricting, or a quadrant 1 and 2, and then quadrant 3 and 4, however you want to look at it, and you make it a 2-part. What the demographers, NC State, this is what they do for districts in North Carolina. They would come back and say, you're going to have to lower your utilization because you're hedging on the future. So you can only use the information that you have. So what they would put out, a big disclaimer, is we're going to do our best to hit the mark, working with transportation, working with all the departments that have programs, but you're going to have to be ready, and they'll have to develop options where you may have to pivot and tell a community, right now you're slated to go to school A, but then when in reality we see that there's not enough room in school A because of the way the program's balanced, and that section or that neighborhood may have to go to a different school. And you have to give full disclaimers to people that you're going to look at that information to make sure that they're balanced. But what happens is with spot districting is you do lower your utilization rates in that calculation. Mm-hmm. Not that we have room for that, right? But it's just maximizing our buildings at the same time. So ideally, that's what a demographer would do. They would try to balance it to minimize that disruption to parents and students. Unlike what you experience in larger districts like Wake County, where annually notices are sent to residents saying next year you will be at school B, not A. That's not what we've been accustomed to in our district, and they would try to balance that.
All right. Melinda, I'm going to put you on the spot.
I'm fine with that. I think, obviously, we've all been putting a lot of thought into this, and I just want to acknowledge how painful this is going to be, not just closing schools, but also the redistricting part. I'm a big believer. Sometimes I think you just need to rip the Band-Aid off, and I would say I really feel like we should really look at closing 2 schools. I mean, looking at the cost savings, I would like for us to redistrict as little as possible. Only have to go through it, once, hopefully. To me, it just makes more sense rather than kind of kicking that can down the road, is going ahead and doing it all at once.
Thank you, Melinda. I'm just going to yo-yo back and forth. Ronnie.
I just want to paint a picture. We're talking about 2 schools, 800 students. The district has other priorities we have to manage. We're going to have to create a redistricting plan for all 800, manage all the programming shifts, rethink transportation, build school schedules, communicate to families where their kids are going to go, and open schools. And I just think the feasibility of this is something that we have to. I totally hear you, Melinda. And as a finance person, I'm like, let's move as fast as we can to get our financial savings. But can we feasibly do it? And should we do that to our community? I just don't know how we do that.
Thank you, Ronnie. George.
Lisa, thank you. To be clear, I have always said for the last 2 years that we need to close 1 school and maybe 2, and I think we need to close 2 schools. But I have a lot of caveats, and I wanted to share them, and I don't know if I'm chasing unicorns here or what sometimes. But before doing that, I want to thank you and Dr. Trice and Ms. Fetters. I know you guys have spent hours, and you have moved us significantly from where we were January 15th to today. So thank you for the effort to get us here, because I feel like we're moving forward. My caveats are this, and it's sort of echoing what Ronnie had said here. If we close 1 school in 2027, and if we open Carver Elementary new in 2029, and we open Estes Hills new in 2030, and we close another school sometime in there, we have got to redistrict the entire district, right? And so I just want us to know, and this is where everybody's going to groan here because working with it is, can we realistically build 3 new schools? And if we are not going to build a 3rd new school, and I've heard prominent people say, yeah, that may not happen, we got to factor that into this discussion too. And I'm not one to go back and revisit the bond, but I can't just say, let's do this, do this, do this, and then in 2 years we're sitting here going, oh my God, we've got another whole school. We should have talked about it. So that's my sort of unicorn, because I know it's all sort of vague, but I think we need some other concrete answers before we just go whole hog into it. And that's a little different from where I've been in the past 90 days about it, because I really do support, we do need to close 2 schools. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, George. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, just to put some numbers around what you're saying, George, is we have $175 million, and it costs about $60 million to build an elementary school, Mr. Ciarochi, about $60 million. Yeah, so 50 to 60 million, and we know that our pay goes decline, and we're tapping into bond money to do the design work. I'm going to say 60, 65 for an elementary school. You just can't do the math with inflation by the time we get to that 3rd school. And so I think the reality is, like, as we're making these decisions, we have to keep that context. So I appreciate you raising it. I just wanted to put some math around it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie. All right, Vicki, I know you had some clarifying questions. Sonia.
So, well, you answered one of my questions, which was to clarify, and then with the timeline, if we were to be able to slow it down with preparing to close and looking at where our population is as we're building, and we possibly could look at the one school that we know we have the money to build right now. We know what we have the right now. So we're looking at a new, larger one school, and we have to close the one, maybe 2, but the new, larger one school will house more and possibly have more space for programming. That would be able to put us in a better mindset in terms of trying to, as Melinda would say, rip the Band-Aid off, but try not to ripping it off. That would prevent the pain of coming it off somewhat, because you would be doing 2 things at once, redistricting and program moving, and then we would have a little more time for some academic return on investment coming in for us to see some responses to where our programs are looking at, so we can have a larger picture of what's going on in our community. And I think, in an additional statement, I think I would like to say is I know that our community has little pockets, and I would like to say that, a lot of people may not realize that Ephesus came aboard in 1972. Another elementary didn't come on board until 1996. That prior to that 1996, this community had 6 elementary schools, and they were not all just community schools, because let me help you understand, for those who were not here and don't all know the actual history of this community, there were lots of kids that had to always ride the bus. There were lots of kids who had to move schools, who were redistricted, and it had nothing to do with building schools. As we know, we're looking at having to close schools for the first time since desegregation, but we've gone through redistricting many times prior to the newer schools coming aboard. And I think we're going to have to start looking a little more back towards full circle and realizing that as our community changes, the way we look at what a community school means needs to change, because if we're all part of CHCCS, which we are, we need to realize that it's not just about the school that's right down the street. And if we get to know who's around the corner and down the street, we may be able to get some of these beloved educators that are moving the mark for some of these students in those pocket schools to help move the mark for some of those kids that are down the street and around the corner too. Because you know what? They need to have the opportunity for their mark to be moved. I know what it's like to go to one school and then get bused to the other school because they didn't have the numbers of people that looked like me. So I stand here and say, I know because I walked those hallways. I know what it's like to go into a school where they weren't prepared to teach people that looked like me. So we have to look at this from all different situations and realize that all of our children are going to need to look at this, and we as the adults are going to need to stand back and realize that what we wanted, what was best for us and what seemed like might be better in your thought might not be what's best for our children that are coming along, because if we don't teach them not to want to be with all the different people with down the corner and around the street, they don't know that they may not want to build community with those people that are down the corner and around the street. They won't know that they should only deal with who's next door. It might be worth them having programming with people from across town. So we really need to look at it from a larger lens to really accomplish what needs to be accomplished. We are small. We need to be smaller. Like I said, we had 6 elementary schools with roughly the same number of students we have now, and we have 11. It's not that different. We had a huge explosion in population for about 20 years, and then it stopped. It literally started going back the other way. We went woo, woo, and it came down. The largest graduating class in Chapel Hill at Chapel Hill High was in the 80s. We started building other high schools, but it's not because the numbers stayed up, because Chapel Hill High was still the only high school for a few more years after that. But the largest class was in 1988. I know because I was in it. So over 500, the only time we hit that high. So people need to understand from which we came so we don't make the same mistakes with where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. All right, Barb.
I want to ask Ronnie about, it's funny because I looked at this timeline and thought it seems totally reasonable, and you think it's not. And I guess, is it that you think from February 26th to fall of 27 is too compressed, or that should all take longer, or that we should do all of this in this amount of time but wait longer to close schools, or neither? Am I just misunderstanding you? I don't know.
No, it's a good question. I appreciate the ask for the clarity. I have an appreciation that we have to move fast. And so I think this is we are where we have to be. I'm just appreciating that having made big decisions and done big implementations, you're always going to run into something unexpected. And so for us to sit here today and say we're going to move 800 students and be ready to reopen schools by the fall of 2020, I just don't see how it happens, right? So I think we have to think about how we are making decisions today. Do we do 1 or 2 schools? What our school consideration criteria are, and march down the path. But being flexible that we may have to just think about how to do this in a different way. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Did you want to weigh in on 1, 2 schools? You kind of have to.
I don't want to right now. Okay. I want to ask Dr. Trice another question.
Okay, all right.
Something that's come up in the many emails we've gotten, and I wanted to tell people we're all reading the emails, is Title I. And so could you just explain, how does a school get to become a Title I school? What are the benefits of being a Title I school? And can you create new Title I schools through redistricting?
So yes, Title I, a federal funding source that's tied to a school's population. We're looking at, essentially social economic status of students in schools. And so if you cross a certain threshold, you are eligible to become a Title I school. In our district, historically, there's been a little flux. Some years you cross that threshold, and in some years you don't. I think it's important for our community to recognize that, as we think about closing schools or replacing schools, and we get into redistricting, that's going to shuffle students all over the district. So if you're a Title I school today, there is zero guarantee that you will be a Title I school after redistricting. It just depends on how the student population plays out across our schools, and if we cross certain thresholds in our schools after redistricting and they're eligible for Title I funding, they will receive it. one of the things that I often think about as well in terms of redistricting, it creates an opportunity to balance social economic issues across our district. It's very difficult to operate a school with a high SES, and we do a great job in our district, but it is a bit of a challenge. And when you don't exercise that muscle of redistricting, sometimes that's what happens as communities change or neighborhoods change. And so, but again, to answer your question, once we go through redistricting, there's no guarantee that any of our current Title I schools will be Title I in the future.
I mean, an issue that I've been thinking about a lot that I haven't heard come up is how many people who live in our district who pay these high taxes who don't have kids who go here. And I am finding it's hard to justify that, to say we're being fiscally responsible with your taxpayer dollars and we got a bunch of schools at 65-70%. That really bothers me. Among all the other issues about our own budget, that really bothers me as an elected official, accountable not just to parents but to everybody who lives here. And so I think we should close 2. I'd like to try to do it in a way that minimizes the number of times we have to redistrict. So I that's above my pay grade, that timing question, but yeah.
Thank you, Barb. So, boy, I'm going to say 2, and I would say immediately. I think the staff know. I've been thinking about this for a while. Sorry, this is hard because, I see some of you and I know some of you, and I know this is hard to hear. These are our staff and our schools, and I think Vicki has highlighted, we've got a lot of history in these schools, but this is something we have to do for our kids. So it's 2. I am sensitive to Ronnie's concern about the compressed timeline. I do feel the pressure that it's external to us, so I won't go on my state federal rant right now. I'll save that for another day. But I think the pressure is external to us. We're not a taxing authority. And I would ask the question to the staff, do they think they can do it? Because it's not going to be the 7 of us who do this work. It's going to be the administration, cabinet, and all the staff that are going to support them. I think it's possible. I don't think it's impossible, and I would hope we would lean on other districts who do it. I mean, we've got neighbors who do redistricting all the time. But I would lean on asking the staff, do you think you can do it? I agree. I would like to see us minimize redistricting as much as possible. I first moved here right when we were doing some of the north side redistricting, so my kids weren't a part of it per se, but I just remember how tense it was, and it wasn't great. And so I'd love to see it minimized. I'd like for us to be thoughtful, like other board members have shared, about the timing of the new schools, because it's the balancing of Wolpert. We don't gain a lot of seats, but we gain a lot of seats pursuant to the confines of what the county and Wolpert has laid out to us. And so, we may not need to have to redistrict after new schools are built. We may be able to delay that for another 2 years, but I would lean on the staff to help us think about, can we do it in a year? My suspicion, and I'm going to look to you, Dr. Trice, to answer it, you wouldn't have proposed this if you didn't think it was possible to be done either.
Right, but I also understand that.
Well, yeah.
I was just noting that you didn't bring a recommendation on 2 schools.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it's important to understand there's a difference between me standing here saying, yes, I think we can do it. There's this idea of trust but verify, as a superintendent and leading our administration. If you were to give us direction, I think it's important for us to demonstrate how we could do it. And so that's a little more than the timeline that I shared today, but it kind of gets into the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of going from point A to point B, whether that's closing a school or 2 schools, to include, moving of programs and finding space. I mean, it will definitely involve us partnering with NC State or another demographer to look at boundary lines. And so, we know that they those partners assist other districts to do it within a year. And that's kind of what we're proposing. But, I stand here today and say yes, but my next move would be to be a little bit more concrete about each step along the way. And to Ms. Dossie's point, it's the human conditions. Things change, issues come up, but we would, need to put that into our timeline. The idea is that we have to start to move on facilities now. As the superintendent, I would prefer not to start with personnel, is what I'm saying. If we start with personnel, on the back end, we still have this issue with facilities, and that would be, in my mind, more disruptive. And starting with personnel, we would likely have to focus on areas that we've come to know and love in our district. When I talk about instructional assistants and counselors and administrators, like, we enjoy those things. And if we have to make decisions about those positions, I'm here fully saying, yeah, we may have to, but at least we'll have a longer runway to kind of help ease that transition. And that's why we would want to start with facilities. But I know I'm talking a lot, but to kind of go back to your point, I think we need a plan to demonstrate how we would go from A to closure of 2 schools if that's the direction we get.
That's helpful. And as you're talking, I'm thinking as a board, if we have to give you something to work with. And why I said 2 is it gives you more financial flexibility to work with than 1. 1 really limits you financially, knowing that we've got this bigger worst case scenario of, what was it, $6.5 million? And I agree with you. I don't want to look for that $6.5 million with people. That is the very, very last place I want to look again. That was hard. That was painful. I don't want to do that again. So that's why for board members, that's why I'm leaning more towards 2. It gives the staff more financial flexibility. I know for community members, it feels like it's personal, but I think I'm just listening to Dr. Trice and the staff.
And I do want to be open, like, if while we're focusing on facilities, I still have to bring to the board at some point soon a staffing plan that right-sizes our organization. So we're not out of the woods with that. Right. This is not, the magic bullet that's going to solve all of our financial issues. It is big, but it is not the only thing that we're doing. We're doing 2 things or 3 things, or maybe 5 things at once when we talk about these budget levers. But we will have to bring a staffing plan to the board to kind of look at concerning our recommendations on, right-sizing the organization based on student enrollment.
And we also have the AROI, the academic return on investment work. So I think that's really important, that we're working hard to be thoughtful about our finances, thoughtful about student outcomes, and looking, like you said, at all levers, not just one. So I agree with you. This isn't going to fix everything.
But to Ms. Fetter's point, facilities is a big one. Our community invests heavily into our schools, and there's quite a bit of inefficiency in our schools. And that in itself is an equity issue, because if you are spending funding on fixed costs, where you could deal with those inefficiencies, those dollars could flow into making sure that every EC classroom has a full-time teacher. We have EC classrooms now, but there's not a full-time teacher, right? And we could address those things and things like that if we were to become more efficient as a district. And we know today that as we close schools, most of the teachers will follow the students. And there are positions that are kind of one-offs that, that wouldn't be the case. But it does give us a little bit more flexibility.
Okay. All right. So, yes. So I got a board member ask. To board members, I know we wanted to start with criteria, but it feels like I want to respect, and it's late, and you guys, a lot of you are elementary parents, so you got an early start. Teachers too. Teachers. And so Board members, do we feel comfortable moving the criteria discussion to our next board meeting?
I think that makes sense. I think this is also an example of compression timeline, right? So like every decision feeds to the next one and pushes further downstream.
Yeah.
But
And just, I know when I was working and talking with the staff about this, we have some buffer. That's why it says February 2026, because we thought this discussion might flow over into another board meeting. Okay. Go ahead, Meredith.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I would be fine pushing the criteria discussion, but I also think that we have a large captive audience here and that it might make sense to address like a couple of things. Like there were definitely some themes that emerged from a lot of the messages that we were getting. And so I don't know if it makes sense, like, I don't want us to go off on like a huge tangent, but like, I do want to acknowledge some of the things that we have been thinking about, and that, I saw a lot of comments about you can't just consider facilities age. And, from my perspective, at least, as an individual board member, that's never been my aim, was to only look at age of facilities. Sure, that's a consideration, but we do have to look at other impacts, and especially as it relates to economics. And so things like walkability, where it affects bus transportation, but we need real numbers on that, not just not a perception, or, we need data that will show us kind of how to proceed. So I guess I just wanted to acknowledge those. I don't want to hijack the discussion. But I did want to, I feel like people have invested their time to come tonight, and so, and I don't know that how many people will be able to come to the next one, and I just want to make sure that we address some of these things.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ronnie.
So I have something related to what Meredith said, but I wanted to close the conversation on the number of schools. Like, how are we going to make a decision about that? Is that when administration comes back with a plan, we'll look at it, or do we want to sort of take the temperature of the board today and make it?
Why don't we take a temperature of the board? Because I think that's going to inform the criteria, and also when we task the administration to do work. So, two. Who says two? So we got 4 2s, 3 1s.
I'm of the mindset.
Oh.
2 while opening 1.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, with the caveat that we need to think creatively on how that looks, and what can be done to minimize the disruption.
I wonder, when we direct the administration about the plan, right, because that's what it is, would it be helpful to also layer in like a draft concept of like how they would achieve? Would that be?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's how I would be able to make a decision. I would need to see a project plan that kind of lays out the steps of the things that need to be considered, timeline, the dependencies, like, what has to feed something else. Mm-hmm. And then I could say, like, I feel comfortable that we can do 2, or we should come back and have a discussion. So I think we need more information before we make a decision.
And obviously, the decision won't be made until June, so we could frame it and send the administration off to make the case, because when it comes time for the board to vote, there's nothing that says we have to vote for 2, right? I think Dr. Trice framed it that way, however, or whatever version the board proposes, right? Is that, okay.
Yeah, I think the timeline looks different if it's 2 than 1, though. So, like, it's what are we asking administration to go do? There would be 2 scenarios. Maybe that's the 1 school, and then there's 2 schools. There's some overlap in the activities, but
that's right.
Each school's individual, and we'd have to think about that.
That's right. Thank you, Ronnie, for pointing that out. Okay. So, I think the temperature of the board is 2 schools. Okay, and I think that gives us a broad umbrella, right? Because it'll include 1. And 2, okay? So I think, was that helpful? Okay, and then, go ahead, Ronnie.
I was going to say, do you feel like you have what you need to kind of think about a plan?
No, I think we need.
No.
I think,
criteria.
I think from a planning standpoint, it'd be important for us to understand criteria.
That's right.
If that's a,
Oh, yeah, I was just about the 2 schools.
oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And also
Yeah.
the guidance of like, it's not just closing 2 schools, but like the timeline and,
Absolutely.
and the needs
Yes.
and
I'm
information
sorry.
and
Yes.
all the things, right? Okay, good.
All right, and then one more thing before we get to criteria. I do want to ask, like, are we open to reconsidering the schools under consideration? And so, well, it's late. Don't you want to go home? Okay, listen.
I have a flight.
So, we've talked a lot about our financial headwinds, and so I just think that it would make sense to consider what could lead to the biggest savings without restricting ourselves to decisions we made when we didn't have full information. And so I would just ask the board to reconsider and allow administration to assess the remaining 5 schools identified as the highest need to the report, excluding Carbo Elementary, given the progress we've already made toward rebuilding that facility. I would say in the previous discussion, some board members raised questions about whether reopening the bond decision might create community confusion. I think we've heard from the community that is not the case. I think they're willing to reengage. And I just go back to the financial considerations. If we constrain ourselves from being able to consider where we might get the biggest savings, I think we're misserving our fiscal responsibility. So.
All right, so Ronnie has asked another question of the board. Do the board members have an appetite to look at more than the 3 schools we previously discussed on January 15th? Or would they like to expand it? And it sounds like you're saying to include Estes Hills and FPG as well. I want to make clear that we need a name.
That's right. Those would be the 5 schools. So Sewell, Glenwood, Estes Hills, Ephesus, and did I already say Glenwood? FPG. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to try again. I'm going to start. Meredith.
Ooh. This is tough for me. I think we did make a commitment to certain schools when we clearly laid out the plan, and there were reasons why we picked the schools that we did for the redevelopment. I think one thing that was not said earlier that I have in my notes that I wanted to make sure that we did say was that one consideration was the ability to rebuild on site while kids are in buildings going to school and then demolish the old building when the new one comes online. It was to minimize disruption so that we didn't have to utilize swing schools, and there were a lot of talk about that at the time. However, I do think in the interest of fiscal responsibility that we should kind of look at all the options, even if we ultimately arrive at the same place that we started. I think, and that means looking at a grid that has criteria listed for all of those schools. So, I would be open to that. I feel like I've evolved a little bit in my thinking over the past couple of weeks. I do think we have to be creative. We have a lot of new information that we didn't have when the bond was being voted on. Most notably, the things that Mr. Ciarochi mentioned in his presentation. So that's where I would fall.
I think we'd like to clarify what is we're saying the statement new information. Can I just ask for you, Meredith, what was the new information?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we voted for the bond, we didn't know about the $21 million gap that the county commission, we didn't know that they were going to consider changing the funding, the allocation model, which I think.
Know that we might not be able to build a 3rd school.
Right. At the beginning we were planning on building the 3 schools, and now there does seem to be some doubt, I am concerned about that. Because I think all of our kids deserve to be in excellent buildings, and we need to figure out the best way that we can do that with the limited funds that we have.
Thank you, Meredith. I'm going to keep doing the way I was before, Melinda. 3 schools, 5 schools.
As the new kid on the board, I wasn't here 2 years ago. So to me, I think, again, you make the best decisions when you have the most information. So we absolutely should open up to 5 schools.
Ronnie?
5.
Know that. And so I know this is difficult, but we made a commitment to them to replace those schools. And, we also were told at that time we would need to consolidate one elementary school, which the word consolidate was used instead of close. But we started talking about closing an elementary school formally in August of 2024. This didn't just happen. There wasn't. We've seen the problem now. It's accelerated to 2 schools, in my opinion. But other than that, nothing's really changed. So I'll stick with 3.
Thank you, George. Vicki?
Dr. Trice, I want to repeat something that you said to make sure everyone understands and is clear about what you said. This is not a problem that just happened. This is a problem that was happening 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, nobody really heard it. It wasn't said out loud. I guess it was the quiet little secret that was in the bubble that is Chapel Hill Carver City Schools, but really isn't. That's something we have to now look at dealing with. And if we don't deal with it, we'll have a situation like Chapel Hill High where they kept kicking it down the road, and we ended up with a new school that was based on something that needed to have been done 25 years ago. So unfortunately, I know this is where we are, but I'm also hearing that we're getting a whole lot. But I want people to understand that no one is saying that, at least from, let me not say no one. Let me say I don't perceive that any of our children should be in a school that's still in the 50s or the 60s. I know what it's like for our kids to have to figure out, and you have to build things to get the school to be where DPI says we have to be now, or the federal government says we have to be now, where you're still trying to make sure you don't find things inside the infrastructure that shouldn't be in the school anymore. We're needing to think about the building itself, and that our people are who make our community and make our schools. So where our students are, where our wonderful staff and teachers are, that will be the life of Chapel Hill Carver City Schools. So I really want us to not feel that we're closing anything. If a building has to close, and even if we consolidate at some point, if our children are going to be in the best facilities with the best staff doing the best work, and they have the state-of-the-art outside and inside wonderful opportunity, I want us to maybe consider embracing that. We've seen it. Guilford did a wonderful opportunity. They did a wonderful job, and we were amazed. And yes, multiple schools were closed to consolidate and make it a larger space, and those children have wonderful opportunities with lots of staff. So I am of the mindset, like I said, I really feel like if we're looking at the ones that are the oldest and the hardest to keep up, to bring kids in along the way, we need to make sure that we're going to be able to have the most accessible. Think about our EC students, newer facilities. Think about our students who need smaller chairs that aren't this small. Kids aren't the same as they used to be. Some are almost 6 feet tall before 3rd grade. I'm just saying we really need to think about doing best practices for our kids. So I'm really of the mindset to hope that we can find our ways to a space where we can be closing 2 schools, opening 1, and looking at the schools that are the oldest and the most in need, and looking at where the programs are and see where that comes to. Do I know which schools they are at this point? No, I don't. But I would like you guys to be able to come back and give us what it is that you think that looks like, and for us to have these conversations with the community. I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse and say that I know those answers tonight. I'm saying I want us to keep listening to them and keep listening to you and do our best practices and do the best. So I don't feel comfortable right now at this point, after everything that we've been hearing them say and you say, that I'm saying it should be what particular school. But I think the shorter list probably is going to be the reality of it, but I don't think there's an issue with you doing a grid showing everything. So if that makes sense to you, I'm not saying I'm changing my mind. I'm saying that there's nothing wrong with our town being the academic epicenter that it is to keep bringing the academics and the information to us. I'll put it that way.
Go ahead, Barb.
I guess I'm just really confused with the people who want to go back to 5, what you think is the significance of the fact that we had multiple meetings, people came, we presented a plan, we voted on it, people voted for the bond, we submitted a capital, thank you so much, but I was the one who wanted to end so you guys could talk, but anyway, we submitted a capital investment plan that was voted on. So is that just it doesn't matter? Like,
I mean, there's so much new information. I don't even understand your question, right? Like, we now are in a position where we talked about 3 schools. We probably can't do them.
No, my specific question is the legal significance of the fact that we have a capital investment plan that was accepted by the county commissioners.
We do that every year.
It's slide 12. It's slide 12 that Mr. Ciarochi
We make
just
changes
presented.
all the time.
Okay. I mean, we're going to have another meeting with.
Can I, Barb, did you want to say
I'm
anything
done.
else? Okay.
I don't think we should go back on the commitments we already made.
Right. So I want to share my thoughts on this, and I can appreciate board members sharing their opinion and what community members think. I think what we're saying is we're hearing from the community, and I don't think that's accurate. We're hearing from some of the community because we named 3 schools, okay? And so if we then go back, then it reopens, and again, let's be sensitive to our financial parameters that we have to live in. This then extends our timeline that is outside of our control. It is 100% outside of our control, our financial situation. And I think that's my concern. And then we are going to go back on the trust of community members where we said, and they also believed that their school was also going to be rebuilt. So, and I don't know, I'm looking out and I see certain colors of shirts, but I don't know if I see Estes Hill's parents here tonight. That's what I don't know. And so that's where I'm just like, so it's for me, it's like we're going back on what we said. And I get it. There are community members who say, well, it wasn't on the bond. It wasn't on the bond because that's not it. It wasn't on the bond because that's not what goes on the ballot for the bond. You don't list the facilities on the bond. But it was an understanding that we presented to the community and the county that it was going to be those 3 schools if fiscally possible. I can hear my board members raise concerns about that 3rd school. That 3rd school, that one has its own set of challenges that I think the staff are going to have to bring to us, that putting it on the table of closure is going to open a whole nother set of issues and challenges. And I could probably talk, and I've talked to some of you ad nauseum about some of the challenges that I've talked to staff about as I've wondered the same thing. Do we reopen it up? Because isn't this going to unlock a whole nother can of worms where we're not just talking about redistricting for that, but then we're just going to be redistricting all schools, period, to address a school. I am hesitant to agree with board members to say that the new information changes which schools we look at. $21 million doesn't change whether it's this school or that school. It's $21 million. That just means we have to make a decision urgently. Full stop for me as a board member. It just tells, what that new information tells me. We no longer have time to go back and revisit and reopen things and debate and tear up this community while we fight over this school is better for this reason or that. We can't do that. We are here for our kids, and we have to show up as board members and buckle down. We're not going to make a perfect decision. We're going to try to make the best decision based on the information we have. But I disagree with board members saying that $21 million changes the schools. For me, it doesn't. It just changes the urgency of what we have to do and asking our staff to work on a more compressed timeline. That's all the $21 million or anything that's going on the county changes for me. It does not change the schools for me. So it doesn't sound like we have consensus to continue with 3. It sounds like we have board members who want to go to 5. And then I'm going to follow the consensus of the board. So I think, well, it's 4-3. I'm so sorry. Thank you, my co-chair. It is the majority of the board. Is that more accurate? The majority of the board I think what board members have agreed as a concession is a grid matrix of some side, just to like narrow down why what schools. Meredith, I want you to.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that is what I was suggesting. I think that it will confirm for us that we're on the right track, but I don't think there's a harm in looking at everything on one page so that we can see it. I don't think that adds much to the timeline. I don't.
Okay.
But, I hear you, and I feel that it is urgent, so.
Yeah, and I just want to remind the community and board members that the criteria about like schools and stuff is dictated by the Wolper Plan. There's considerations that the county has given us. So, I mean, I agree, we probably come to the same conclusion. I would say to the staff, I feel like we need to have that grid ASAP.
I'm sorry, I'm confused about what grid we're talking about. I think what the board just said is we want to have all the schools considered according to the criteria that we lay out to make a decision.
Okay.
So I think the next step might be like if we want to start brainstorming criteria, if you thought that would be a good use of time.
Okay. So board members, you want to start talking about criteria tonight, or at least framing of the criteria? We do have to have, because it's a work session item. That's what I was suggesting. Could we, I know it doesn't feel great, could we move criteria? I mean, one thing we could do is frame the criteria. So like, what are the parameters for the criteria for us to consider?
Yeah, I mean, could we spend like maybe 10 minutes with like just brainstorming some criteria that'll give us a baseline to come back to on our next meeting to build from that?
Sure. Right, 10 minutes.
I mean,
we got time right here. All right, so board members, I mean, you can speak freely. It doesn't have to be in an order. In terms of, well, I would like to start by framing the criteria. So can I offer that? And I think the framing of the criteria really is rooted in the box that the county gives to us. Like in deciding which schools we are being framed by Wolper, because no matter what we do, what we decide, we have to take it to the county to change our plan. So it's Wolper, it's the county requirements, right?
I don't agree with that. I like some of the top line criteria I think about are like the cost of maintenance over 5 years. I'd love to see that laid out for each building. The cost of offlining a facility, the cost to replace buildings, program impacts, transportation impacts, minimizing minutes on the bus for students, what transportation costs are, walkability, how many students are in walk zones around the buildings. To me, those are the things that would help us make decisions that get us to the highest financial savings, least disruption, and minimize impact to the community. And that's an insufficient list because it's just what I'm sure there's more.
Thank you, Ronnie. Barb.
I mean, I don't think it's that hard. I think it has to be about what saves us the most amount of money. Okay, so because this is about saving money. And so walkability, first of all, there's tons of research that walkability and diversity, racial diversity, are absolutely incompatible. We have a ton of residential segregation in this community. And so we can consider walkability only insofar as it is a cost issue. That's how I think about it anyway. If you have more walkers, you save less, you save on busing, but walkability as its own
I'm sorry. We're gonna have public comment. I'm going to ask you all to kind of hold your comments and let the board members finish discussion. I know, but this is the way the board process works, so please be respectful.
Thank you, Ronnie.
So anyway, I agree with everything you said, Ronnie. I just wanted to do that asterisk with walkability.
Other board members' comments on at least just the starting point of criteria. Doesn't mean this is where we're landing.
I don't think you said housing, and I think we need to look at that, like the housing development, because I know there's been a lot of talk about that, and I want to know, of new units, what's coming, and how many of them do we actually expect to house families? because I think that it's actually not as many as we think, according to people on the town council that we've spoken to, as well as the Chamber of Commerce presentation that we got. So I'd like to look at housing.
Thank you, Meredith. Any other board members, some initial thoughts? George?
I just want to remind people that the only real criteria I used that separated the 3 from the 3 that didn't get rebuilt was the ease with building on site while kids stay in school. And because all 6 of the schools needed to be replaced with a new modern facility. And no one of them is more important or less important or more valuable to the greater good, in my opinion. They just happen to be where they're located and where you live. You're assigned to school there. So if we do change, I mean, I'm not going to, it's like, then I want to hear we got to have a plan now for 500 kids to be out of their building for 3 years while we build a new school for them, because that was in our discussion last year. And that's going to be a reality, and that's going to require then a swing school with seats in it. And we went through all this. And I don't look forward to doing that again, but I would be pushing us as we look at criteria to put that out there, because that's a reality. And I think we're just revisiting a major part of what we did, and we should stay committed to doing the best we can to replace the next 3 schools. Or in this case, it might be 1 or 2, but still, that was our goal, was modern facilities for the kids.
Thank you, George. Melinda?
I mean, ultimately, we're doing this because we have to save money. I mean, otherwise, if we had, plenty of money, we would keep all the schools open and rebuild them all. So to me, I think all of our criteria is really going to be based around that. I think another one, I thought Ronnie's list was excellent. I also would look at, speaking your language, Amriza, about energy efficiency. Are some of these schools so old that they're really inefficient in terms of energy usage? But yeah.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Vicki.
As I have said to you in a prior meeting, that I think that, and like I said, I'm not saying that I've changed my mind. It's not that. I'm saying that I think, based on where some of the board members were saying that they would like to see all the information in one space, I think as we're doing community engagement meetings, when we tell them what you've been telling us tonight, which makes sense to me, I hear what you're saying, I still feel like that we have, it may be 1 or 2 school communities here, but we're going to have to be addressing 11 school communities, and they're all going to want to look to see, show me how, not necessarily tell me. So if you have a PowerPoint or a presentation that says the same thing that you said to us tonight, which makes sense to me because I'm hearing you, and I think you've done a phenomenal job laying it out. So as we're going around saying those things in those different spaces, I think that will help bring our community along to what's going to be a painful situation, but it helps them feel more communal that they were a part of it and not just being spoon-fed what may be what has to happen, but they at least will be a party to it in that way. So that's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Vicki. Well, since people are throwing out criteria, something for us to think about is that might differentiate some of the schools' already investments that have been made in some of these schools and when they've been made. Also, forecasting of like major failures for some of these old facilities. So if we haven't spent money on some of these old systems in some of these schools, it is inevitable that we will have to spend it in the future. I think it goes back to that $10 million chart. And so just because it hasn't happened, the team, I know the operations team is anticipating a major failure in some of these systems. So I think we need to also look at some of those things. But I think we've got kind of a round list right now. That doesn't mean next time we come back, board members won't think about other criteria to think about.
Well, and I'd love like administration perspective, Mr. Ciarochi's probably done multiple of these before, and he's probably got some thoughts that we should be thinking about too.
All right. No, I didn't see anyone keeping time for me, so I'm going to say that's 10 minutes. All right, so we've given you, Dr. Trice, a lot of things to think about. Obviously, we're going to talk more and narrow down the criteria for you and the team. Board members, I'm going to close our work session on this topic.
Just a point of clarification.
Sure.
For the administration, this topic of criteria is on the next.
That is,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have not finalized the criteria. So. All right. Let's go. All right. Now we're into work session public comments. I'm not going to read the spiel. It's 2 minutes. We're going to have teacher organizations, SIT, or student groups go first. And then, Tamara, you're going to help me with everyone who signed up. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Mr. Link, I see you coming forward.
Madam Chair, since we're at a crossroads, and I do this virtually every time, I'm happy to stay to the end. There are people here who have been waiting 3+ hours this evening. I would ask, as a point of personal privilege, Madam Chair, if the organization's comments could be paired with my own individual comments, and I would go to the end of the line to allow others who have been here tonight to speak first.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Next up, we've got Tiffany Englert. Thank you. I know I called you Tiffany the other day. I didn't pronounce her last name.
Good evening. My name is Tiffany Engler, and we have our families at Ephesus. I'm the PTA president. We are the squeaky wheel in your inbox right now, and I appreciate all of your time. I've also worked in this town to advance affordable housing here, and I organize teacher trainings across the South. Throughout all this, I've learned this truth. When children have fair access to quality public education, communities don't just survive, they strengthen. At Ephesus, we say Ephesus is all of us. That is not a slogan. It is a description of how a school functions when it is doing what it is meant to do. Including Ephesus in closure discussions signals that student access, equity, and growth are secondary concerns, and that message carries consequences far beyond this decision cycle. Ephesus is more than an aging facility. Despite continued deferred maintenance, it delivers critical services and is filled with joy. Last year, it led the district in elementary academic growth. It houses 2 of the district's 3 EC pre-K teachers, serves a significant Title I population, and supports one of only a few Head Start programs. 65% or more of our students walk or roll to school, reducing barriers and transportation costs. And Ephesus will serve neighborhoods with approved affordable housing developments nearby, meaning it is directly tied to the district's future enrollment. It is also one of few existing campuses with land positioned for growth and absorbing displaced communities. That is what Ephesus is all of us looks like in practice. It's access, stability, and growth that's working together. I am encouraged by the superintendent's long-term vision for a strong, sustainable CHCCS. Reimagining our district is not something that we fear, but vision without process undermines the trust this district is asking of families and staff to extend. How you define a school in this process will determine not just which buildings remain open, but which communities are seen, protected, and worth planning for. Ephesus can be for all of us. Thank you.
Next up is Amanda. Is it STEM? Thank you, Amanda.
Good evening. I'm Amanda Stem. I'm a parent at Ephesus Elementary School, and I'm the advocacy chair on the PTA at Ephesus. And I was planning something different, but I changed my mind, and I want to just but I still want to exercise my right to make a comment and say this was really challenging. This was really hard. Thank you so much, and I want to thank all of Ephesus for showing up. This is really meaningful, and all the other schools here that, We just want this to be done right, and the transparency, and we appreciate, I think we appreciate just the acknowledgement that information has changed, perspective on the information has changed, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Melissa? Thank you. Thank you, Tamara.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Maris. I'm here tonight on behalf of previous Ephesus PTA presidents to tell you what sets Ephesus apart as much more than an elementary school. Ephesus is a place where children are known, where parents volunteer because they know they belong, and where teachers don't just educate, they invest. The culture here is not accidental. Ephesus is a walkable school where teacher families are neighbors with student families, where grandparents volunteer to plant flowers on School Beautification Day, where Larry the crossing guard is a local hero, and where members of the neighborhood listserv dug deep into their pockets to feed Ephesus families when SNAP benefits were suspended this fall. There is a social foundation upon which this school is built. This community support is a unique feature of our neighborhood school, and it empowers Ephesus to routinely surpass academic standards. It's what keeps staff at Ephesus for decades of service. It's what makes our students proud to call themselves roadrunners. When young families move to our state, they are drawn to Chapel Hill for its excellent public education. And families who really do their research often choose to live in the Ephesus neighborhoods of Briarcliff and Ridgewood. This is a place where people continue to invest in public education generation after generation because they see the value it holds for their families. It's not just our staff who go above and beyond to bring out the best in our children. The way that people show up for this school is deeply ingrained in our walkable community. It's a whole ecosystem grounded in the day-to-day lives of the neighborhood. Ephesus is not just a school. It's the heart of a beloved community. Once a school like Ephesus is gone, what's lost cannot be measured on a spreadsheet. Thank you for your consideration and for your continued service to our district. This letter is signed by Tiffany Englert, myself, Irene Ciarochi, Laura Owen, Elizabeth Portnoy, and Boykin Bell.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and the board, for everyone's clear thought and investment in this discussion tonight. My name is Dr. Brittany Davidson, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Ephesus Elementary School Improvement Team. I've amended my comments because lots of things have been brought up, but I want to echo that we really do recognize the district's enrollment and budget pressures and appreciate the challenge that everyone in this room is facing tonight. We ask several things of you, is that please publish the closure criteria and weighting before any recommendation is made, and providing scenario-by-scenario due diligence that includes an all-cost financial analysis that does not only include facility savings, but also transportation impacts, transition and redistricting costs, staffing impacts, and the ongoing cost of maintaining an inactive building. And also an equity impact analysis with mitigation strategies, again, before any recommendation comes out. Ephesus Elementary deserves careful consideration because the evidence shows that it is a school that is working well, especially for the often marginalized students who most benefit from stability and strong relationships. Our teacher working conditions data are stronger than district and state averages. Students report higher levels of school connectedness and climate than district and national standards. And academically, as mentioned before, Ephesus has the highest end of grade growth among CHCCS elementary schools last year and met or exceeded growth targets across student groups. That includes students with disabilities, multilingual learners, economically disadvantaged students, and all racial and ethnic groups. Those outcomes reflect years of intentional effort by a cohesive group of teachers and specialists and support staff who partner with families who are clearly very deeply engaged. And for a Title I school serving a naturally diverse neighborhood, that connectedness is not incidental. It is a key driver of progress. Ephesus is uniquely walkable. Again, as mentioned, 2/3 of our students live in the walk zone, myself included. Closing Ephesus would split a successful community across multiple schools, increasing longer distance busing, adding traffic and transportation costs, while disrupting the very community-based conditions that have produced all of these strong results. Thank you for your consideration tonight.
I know I'm not Eric. I'm Mallory Turner. And my interest in the school closure issue stems from my roles as a mother, a realtor, and a PhD in maternal and child health. My husband and I moved to the Ridgefield neighborhood adjacent to Ephesus when I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 18 months old. My husband grew up in this neighborhood, walking and biking to Ephesus Elementary with his 3 sisters, an experience that we wanted for our daughter as well. My daughter is not yet a road runner, but currently attends a daycare in the neighborhood, and each day that I walk her there, we chat with neighbors who have become our supportive community. My daughter and I also bond together, talking about each dog and squirrel that we pass. Our experience bonding with our community and with each other in this way is reflective of so many children in our neighborhood, past and present, who have had this opportunity. I ask that the board consider the many benefits of walkable schools in making their decision. As a realtor and advocate for affordable housing, I recognize that housing around the Ephesus community is among the most affordable in Chapel Hill, with recent home sales in that area $165,000 below the median Chapel Hill price. Ephesus is also near the highest density of affordable housing units in Chapel Hill, with more in development. I ask that the board consider where young, lower resource families can afford to move and the disparate value of proximity to school for these families when making their decision. As a PhD in maternal and child health, I studied the long-term social, cognitive, and health benefits of pre-K, particularly for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Ephesus has the highest number of NC pre-K and Head Start classrooms in the district and is a Title I school, providing continuity of support for children attending these programs. You may argue that you can simply move these programs to a different school, and while that is true, you cannot move the community. The walkable Ephesus community organically brings together children from wide-ranging socioeconomic backgrounds, both inside and outside of the school. I ask that the board consider the equity impacts of closing a school with critical programming for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Thank you so much. I know this is a hard decision. I appreciate your time.
Hi, I am the mom of a kindergartner at Ephesus that is not in the walk zone. We are not in the walk zone. We don't experience that benefit, except that we do. In the community it creates, it makes such a big difference. And I know that that community matters in a way that the Wolpert study maybe didn't show. I think you guys are doing such a good job. This is so hard. Even listening, I changed my mind like 6 times about everything. But I think for me and so many other people to feel good about it, we do need to feel like I voted on that bond and I didn't know exactly what I was voting for. And I want to have all the information to feel like this is the best thing long-term, holistically, for literally everybody, not just me and not just our community. And I'm willing to accept that if we look at everything, including the other schools that were discussed previously. And I'm sorry that I'm asking you to do that again. But I hope that we can, so that I just know that this was the best thing and the only option.
Hi, I'm Danielle Raffetto. I'm a first grade teacher at Ephesus. Thanks. I'm really tired. I don't want to. I am a great teacher, but I don't know that I'll do my best tomorrow. We've heard a lot. Thank you all so much. As was said, this is hard. And I, too, have gone back and forth with changing my mind and what I think is great and not great. And I guess I don't need to touch on a lot of the things that others are saying or going to say. I think most importantly, I recognize that all of our schools in our district have communities, and all of them are important. All of them are valuable, and they all have highly qualified teachers. They all have students with needs, with various needs. I want to make sure that decisions are made transparently and that we know that all of the information that went in, the bond going to what I understood as the 3 school's in worse condition, and maybe I'm wrong. You know, I don't know those details. And if they were, why would we spend the money to fix those? And so I'm sure there's a lot of information I'm missing. But I think we deserve to have that and full discussion of it. I have in my hand a racial equity impact assessment card that teachers in this district are expected to use and school improvement team when making decisions. And I hope that you have it available. I hope that the board, the administration in our district has it available, because which racial and ethnic groups might be most affected by the changes we're going to make. Those are some of the questions. Examine the cause. And maybe you do use these, but I know if it's important for us, it's important for y'all. And on a personal note, I have to truly admit that I don't want what's best for the budget. I want what's best for our students, my students, the district students. I do want what's also, that's just my primary drive. Budget too, but that's not why I'm here. And taking a little bit more time might, you know, I don't know how I feel about that. I also bought my first home as an adult single woman, in the district in affordable housing, so I see how that works and benefits us all. Thanks.
Thank you, Danielle.
Hi, guys. I'm Sarah McDaniel. I am a 28-year resident of and a 23-year homeowner in the Chapel Hill Schools District. I'm also currently a parent of students at Ephesus and Phillips Middle. I have followed your decision-making over many years. I have been a very involved citizen and parent. I love this community so much, and I'm probably going to cry. But it is really important to me that you realize that when that school bond was approved, that I really wanted it because I love our schools. There was no talk publicly about imminent school closures. The only decision at that time that the school board communicated was that Estes, FPG, and Carborough were going to be targeted for renovations. And we were thrilled about that. And I believe that, you know, the need to close 2 schools, like, this is a big deal. But it changes the calculus for all of this. It's why we need to look at all 5 again. Equity is one of our school district's most important shared values. Ephesus has had tremendous success with its model. The students that it supports grow more than at any other school in elementary school in the district. They take care of every type of student, from those in the most need to those who are thriving every day. They do it better, in my opinion, than anyone else. They have shown us the way. They have the leadership, staff, and capacity today to take on all of the challenges that we've talked about today, and they need to keep doing it.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Pam Shires, teacher at Ephesus. I'm also former parent from Ephesus, parent in the district. I have been asked to read just a few notes from 5th grade students from our school. I will keep them very brief. One student said, our school should definitely stay open because it is basically the heart of our whole neighborhood. It's where we grew up together, and for a lot of us, the teachers are like our second family who actually know our names and how we learn. And I'll sort of summarize with, losing our school would feel like losing our home away from home, and that's just not fair to the kids who are still growing up here. Another one, I think our school should stay open because it's where everyone is welcome, it's safe, it's fun. And a memory, if I ever could have a chance to bring someone here, I would really want to come back when I'm in middle school and never forget it. Of the teachers, specials, assemblies. And then if I had another sibling, I'd like to see them grow up here and do many programs like Odyssey of the Mind or YMCA after school, and I'd walk them to the bus and wait for them at their stop and other stuff. IDK, I'd like to take my kid there because it's going to be going on forever. My dad's, my uncles, my sister went here, and I'd like my kid to go here just to have him have fun, and that's why the school should stay open. Ephesus is home to a lot of people for over 50 years, children of parents who went the generation before. It's a home for all types of people, welcoming them all. There are activities, sports, festivals to enjoy at any time. Ephesus is meant to be a safe place for all. Teachers have been students at Ephesus before, becoming teachers so they wouldn't have to leave the beauty of the school. Ephesus is a heartwarming place, and many students, teachers, and even parents would agree. Please keep Ephesus open.
Hi, my name is Sarah Snyder. I'm a mom of 4, therefore I did my demographic duty to provide kindergartners to you. I grew up in Charlotte. I was bused across the city of Charlotte to go to a school where I was in the 10% white population. I was a minority. I believe in diversity, hardcore. My middle school was actually diverse. My high school was not. We lived in Lake Forest. I love the proximity to things, but I didn't like I couldn't let my kids free range because the roads are too narrow, it's too ravinous. So when it was time for my firstborn to attend kindergarten, I toured 5 schools because my mom is an early ed, board certified master's degree teacher, and I'm a peds nurse, so I care about childhood development. I did all my due diligence. My son got a spot at FPG. We toured it. I toured Creekside. I toured Ephesus. I toured Voyager because he got into Voyager, and we based our home purchase on the amazing culture at Ephesus, the incredible culture at Ephesus. It is a diamond in the rough. It is so worth it. I have not regretted that. I have one that's graduated and is at Phillips in that disaster of traffic. I have a 3-year-old that's to start in 27, 28. And what I want to say to you is I really want you to look at the Ephesus slide deck that was put together by a bunch of parents that has a lot of the data that you're looking for, that they have pulled and they have cited. And then the other thing I want to say is that you don't have enough money to build 3 schools. You don't have enough money to build FPG. Programs can move. Communities, people bought their homes to go to that school. We bought our homes because we realized the amazing culture at Ephesus. It's diverse. It's got great ratios. There's great learning, as you can see. Move the programs. You can't rebuild FPG. You can move the program. You're going to have swing schools because you're going to close 2 schools. So building on site is not even going to be an issue anymore because you're going to close 2 schools. So you're going to have 2 schools open to swing those kids. So you got to reevaluate everything there. You don't have enough money to build FPG.
Thank you for taking the time to let us all speak and for listening and for making these difficult decisions that I do not envy. My name is Sarah Roberts. I'm a parent of 2 children who have been at Ephesus Elementary from kindergarten and will finish 5th grade. This is a very personal story, so I know it's not based in data and it's not based in finances, but perhaps some of it can be translated that way. But I just wanted to share it because it's from just a personal perspective. Our oldest is now in middle school at Phillips, and our youngest is in 4th grade at Ephesus Elementary. Having been raised in Raleigh myself, I attended Wake County Public Schools from kindergarten through high school. My mother spent her entire career as a dedicated educator and leader for Wake County Public School System. This is all to say I have an entrenched belief in the power of public education. So when my husband and I had children, we knew we would be devoted to supporting public education for them. As new parents, we were living in California, and as our oldest reached preschool age, we were looking to move somewhere with a strong public school system. We chose to return to our home state and chose the town of Chapel Hill for that reason. When looking at neighborhoods we could plant our roots in, for our family, we landed in a neighborhood within walking distance of Ephesus Elementary. And what has come from the experience of living in this area and being a part of the Ephesus community has given us more than what could be put in numbers or data points. The adage, "It takes a village to raise a child," never rang as true to me as it did when my children started elementary school. The challenges we faced when we discovered our son was neurodivergent presented new complexities that required classroom support and communication with teachers and staff for his entire K-5 years. At Ephesus, each and every educator, staff, and administrator met us where we were, provided mutual support, and most importantly, met our son where he was.
Hi there. Thank you guys so much for your time. My name is Jackie Bangma, and I am here today to represent the parents of the future Ephesus Elementary Roadrunners. We submitted a letter today with over 50 family signatures representing over 84 future students. So I want to take a few minutes of your time to highlight several key points we detailed in our letter. Many of us moved here specifically for the neighborhood, myself included. Ephesus isn't just a building, and it's the most walkable school in the district and the heart of a thriving community. Families gather on sidewalks. Children walk to school together. I don't have a kid in the school, and I can see that. Parents build support networks simply by stepping outside their homes. My daughter is not yet 8 months old, and I have already found a community among the parents in the neighborhood. That's how tight it is. So I do not exaggerate when I say, in an era where social disconnection is recognized as one of the gravest threats to health and well-being, that this everyday connection is invaluable to the parents and students of our community. In addition, Ephesus is a Title I school with a Head Start program. Families who rely on these programs will bear the greatest harm from its closure, as we have heard several times today from other folks. We are deeply concerned about the decisions that disproportionately burden those with the fewest options. And finally, we supported the 2024 school bond thinking that it would protect our schools. We were shocked to learn almost a year after the bond was passed that our schools are on the chopping block. So if members of our community seem upset tonight, it is because of this. We feel we were misled. In short, we feel strongly that closing Ephesus would profoundly and negatively impact our children and our community that is one of a kind. If this board believes that closure is truly necessary, we ask that you consider the district as a whole and thoroughly evaluate all schools identified as candidates for closure. Thank you.
Hi, I'll keep this quick to not repeat what others have said. I'm a parent of one, hopefully soon two, students at Sewell. And like many others, I wanted to attend tonight to show how strong the Sewell community is. But being here, I can't help but feel just a deep disappointment that we are all in a position where we feel we must do that and feel we must compete with each other. Frankly, I really appreciate the focus tonight on determining an appropriate process for finding the right path. Closing schools is a serious business, and we need an equally serious process. And while I appreciate the time pressure, perhaps the most surprising thing I have heard tonight is that you're moving forward with closing schools without a comprehensive plan in place. Not only to get the finances right, but a plan that represents a clear vision for what we want the district to be. Sure, I buy that closing schools is a key piece of fixing the problem, fixing the budget, but it's not really good enough to disrupt our schools and communities without the assurance that it's being done as part of a complete plan that you're articulating to us. So that's what I would ask, that as you move forward, you develop an actual strategic plan, long-term plan, and communicate that to us. Thanks.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Trice. My name is Bailey Norman, and I have been the librarian at Ephesus Elementary for the past 3.5 years. I'm also a member of the school's equity team, and I'm here tonight to speak on its behalf regarding the matter of future planning considerations for elementary schools. The equity team at Ephesus has the express responsibility of identifying and addressing inequalities on an institutional level and ensuring that any proposed actions and decisions we make lend to the advancement of racial equity and greater inclusion within our school. In order to facilitate this work, we consistently and effectively utilize the systematic, evidence-based racial equity impact assessment, or REIA tool, which my colleague Daniel Orfetto already pulled out. We implore you, the board, and Dr. Trice to share with us whether the REIA framework will be meaningfully used during your decision-making process in order to effectively anticipate and minimize unintended adverse consequences, not only to our community's most vulnerable and underrepresented populations, but to our community as a whole. The REIA assessment begins by identifying who is most affected by a proposal. You've already heard about our community and who will be affected by this proposal. The REIA framework also asks decision makers to consider whether those most affected have been meaningfully engaged. Families who rely on walking to school, families navigating housing instability, and staff whose jobs and school community are at risk must be authentically involved. And we also must examine our data. You've also heard that we were the elementary school that grew all students last year. And applying an equity lens also allows us to examine root causes and not just symptoms. It's well known that we are facing a severe housing affordability in Chapel Hill. And we also urge the board to consider equity in staffing decisions. Please look at my email that I sent with contracts from other districts around the country that have equitable and transparent decision-making processes for transfer and reassignment. Thank you for your time and for the responsibility you carry from our equity team.
Yeah, we're waiting for a while. I have some one letter, but with a lot of silence. I can pass you the copies. And let me see. You take the copies. Okay. And I know this meeting is not talk about cancel any programs or like Mandarin, dual language, magnet, whatever. But after hear a lot of information, that's a lot, really. A little bit messy to me. So in case something will happen, always will change something in a year, 2 years, we don't know. So my opinion is we in the Glenwood Elementary School community have followed discussion about the possible school closure with great interest. That's a few weeks ago. And Glenwood Elementary, one of the schools mentioned for possible closure, has been the location for the Mandarin dual language and world language programs for many years. Our concern whether the Chapel Hill Cobra City Schools Board chooses to close Glenwood or another school, or two of us, I don't know, is that the Mandarin dual language and world language programs continue. These language programs have been a great asset, not only to the Chinese community, but to the large Chapel Hill Cobra community as a whole. A number of non-Chinese parents have chosen Glenwood because of the Mandarin programs, and their children are a vital part of these classes as well. Indeed, half or more of students in my two daughters' classes are non-Chinese. Yeah. Okay, you'll read it. No problem. We just want to make sure it continue to be so in the future in our program.
Thank you so much. If you could hand your letters to our clerk. Thank you so much.
So, board members and Dr. Trice, I am a proud Ephesus parent. I had a whole speech ready to go, but as I looked up and listened to the positions that you guys have, I feel badly that you have to make any of these decisions. And I come from a finance background, so I know how hard these decisions can be. I've been looking, and the picture behind you for wellness is of Rhody and Ephesus. Ephesus is a school. Where we live, we will probably be redistricted out of the Ephesus school district because of where we live. We are not in the walkable zone. But I feel strongly that my words need to be listened to because Ephesus is such a great school. You talk about moving programs, but you're going to move all of the teachers to different schools, and you are going to lose the secret sauce that there is at Ephesus. You will lose the Dr. Sherman. You will lose Bailey, the librarian. You will lose all of these to other places, and they will not be together. We have a 90.2 academic growth in a school that you call failing. How does that happen? It is not about the building. It is about the people. And I understand that you will have these from Estes Hill, from FPG, from all of the other schools, and that we are the loudest here, and you will have opportunity to talk about others. I thank you for opening this up to 5 other schools, because we will probably go to one of those other schools. But I think that it is important that you listen to the community and you listen to the teachers, and moving them around is not always the best decision for the students. To conclude, the board's mission is to do what is in the best interest of the children. Relocating 800 students and me being a project manager, projects do not go on the timelines that they have. So you wanting to close it and be ready for the 27-28 year is impossible on an 800 students. I understand the finances, but you have to think about this methodically. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. Thank you, board members, for this opportunity to speak with you. My name is Rachel Rossi. I'm a parent of a 2nd and 4th grader at Glenwood Elementary's World Language Mandarin program. All 394 students at Glenwood get Mandarin. I currently serve as the vice president of the PTA. I'm very grateful that the district has offered this world language pathway to my children. I'm grateful to the wonderful staff, teachers, and admin who make it all possible. I am also grateful that both programs live under one roof. This offers 2 great advantages. One, Glenwood's excellent staff is efficiently used for both programs, and dual language students offer peer support to world language students in their Mandarin studies. But the greatest advantage is that it allows my children to learn Mandarin not in isolation, but with real cultural context. It's not just symbols on a page, but the names of fellow students. The teacher's greeting, Zhao Zhang Hao, which means good morning, in the car line. The glee waiting for the dumplings at the Lunar New Year event. A true cultural exchange takes place every day at Glenwood. STEAM, world language, dual language programs are like 3 cords that have been braided together. They create a rich tapestry. We believe that Glenwood's thriving ecosystem of multi-layered programming is the future of this district and what can separate it from other districts. We firmly believe that you should look at all 5 schools because assumptions that were made with that bond no longer exist. We all voted on that bond in the good faith that more schools were going to be considered for phased out renovations. That has changed. The reality has changed. Many people in this room may not have voted that way. So we need to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for listening tonight. I understand it's a very hard decision. My name is Frances Tong. I am Glenwood's PTA treasurer. I'm also a statistician by training. I love having my son at Glenwood. He's a 2nd grader, but I also believe in data-driven decision-making, and I'd like to share 3 statistics that highlight Glenwood's impact on district enrollment. The Glenwood PTA conducted a survey, and we heard from 118 current, prospective, and former families. First, the survey indicates that the Glenwood's language program boosts district enrollment by attracting families to the district and retaining families who might otherwise choose private charter out-of-district options. Nearly 90% of respondents said Glenwood and its language program influenced their decision to move here. Second, if the program were relocated, 93% said they would consider or definitely move to follow it, which shows how strongly enrollment is tied to the program, not just the building. Third, if Glenwood was closed and the program eliminated, only 14% said they'd be willing to enroll at their neighborhood school. The district projects Glenwood as the only school at full capacity in 2035. This data suggests that closing Glenwood and its exceptional program wouldn't just redistribute students in the district, it would just lose them. Thank you for listening.
Okay, I had to edit this down. I hope it still makes sense. Thank you all so very much for serving our school community and doing this very hard work. I'm Kirsten Venema, and I have some concerns about the possible closure of Ephesus Elementary, a school that has been part of my life for more than 5 decades as a student, a teacher, and a community member. I understand the larger context, I think. District enrollment has declined and difficult financial decisions are here, and they are here now. I supported the recent bond referendum, which aimed to rebuild FPG, Carborough, and Estes Hills, but those of us who supported the bond did not know that we were doing this to save some schools over others. We did so because we believe in strong, equitable public schools across the district. My concern is now how this process is unfolding and whether there's been sufficient community engagement as schools like Ephesus are seriously considered. I urge the board to take a district-wide approach when considering school closures, one that is grounded in research about which schools can be rebuilt, which require the most significant repairs, and when that work is feasible. I ask that these decisions be made with care, equity, and a long-term perspective. Any school closure is painful, but Ephesus deserves deeper examination. It has a strong staff, solid student outcomes, as you've heard, and remains one of the most walkable schools serving affordable housing. It has supported families across generations, and closing it would mean losing a deeply rooted community institution. School closures are never just facility decisions. Schools hold the everyday experiences that shape people long after they leave. I was a student at Ephesus from 1975 to 1981, and years later I returned as a teacher, spending 29 years teaching multilingual students, many of whom lived in our walk zone. When I was there, we started the Starfish Mentor Program, and one of my Starfish students is now a teaching assistant at Ephesus and part of the TA to Teach program. She's extraordinary. She told me she wrote you a letter. Thank you in advance for reading it. I also have I'll just say, as you consider school closures, I ask you to look beyond buildings and numbers. Ephesus is a multi-generational community, as I said, with a proven record of serving students and families well. Thank you for this opportunity to share concerns.
Hey, good evening. I'm Ash Sherman. I'm the school counselor at Ephesus, and I'm here on behalf of myself and several dozen of my colleagues who also asked me to share this statement tonight. So I want to first start by thanking you all for this. It is late. We are tired. Emotions are high. Please know that we see you and we see how hard this is and how hard you're working for our community. So thank you. I also want to thank you for opening up consideration to the remaining bond schools. Even if the decision turns out the same in the end, please know that it goes a long way with our community to be able to feel that this is a comprehensive, yet still hopefully timely decision-making process. So we really, truly do appreciate you. And I know that in the coming months, you're going to hear a lot more about our school community at Ephesus. You're going to hear a lot more about our crumbling and sometimes very smelly building, literally. But I also wanted to echo some of the things that were shared tonight about our community, because there's a reason that we have such high teacher working conditions data. There is a reason that our students report such high connectedness at school, so much higher than our district and national averages. And there's also a reason why we do have the highest student growth in the district, and not just overall, but for every single demographic. Students with disabilities, every single racial and ethnic demographic. And that reason has nothing to do with our crumbling and smelly building, and it has everything to do with the relationships in our community. It's not just all of these amazing people that are here tonight and that couldn't be here tonight. It's not any individual amazing teacher. It's the fact that we have built intentional relationships that have led to continuous improvement over literally decades of work. And so it didn't happen randomly. It didn't happen overnight. And even though a school closure hopefully would result in many of my colleagues still having jobs in other amazing schools too, those relationships can't be replicated and they can't be recreated quickly either. I'll also finish with echoing the fact that nearly 2/3 of our students do live in our walk zone. And not only is it just that we have a large walk zone, but it's that our walk zone hosts some of the most affordable housing in Chapel Hill, as other folks have mentioned. That includes public housing. That includes 150 new family units in the upcoming Legion Road development, which is within eyesight of our building. And so not only do I feel that we're an irreplaceable fixture in our community, but our closure would be a profound loss. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for doing this tonight. I know it's been a long night. You all are working hard, and we appreciate it. I know none of the schools want to be pitted against each other. You're going to hear about why we're all wonderful and why we should all be kept, and we understand that there's also data that you need to inform your decision. So I'm mainly, I didn't actually introduce myself, and I'm sorry. Emily Kreutzer, Glenwood PTA president. I have a fourth grader in the dual language program. I mainly want to ask for you to share the data on what the criteria is for the decisions and for it to be very transparent with all the schools, because then we're not being pitted against each other and we're not having to say, oh, this school has this and this school doesn't have this and these test scores are better than this school. So I just would ask that you share that information and be very transparent about it and the criteria. And then also I would like to have the timeline for closure and the decision for closure to be shared, because I know that staff at our school has been very impacted by it. And even if positions are going to be saved, they don't know if it's going to be a position available for them, especially when there's the librarians, when it's the social workers, when it's the nurses, when we have one nurse at every school. And we have these really fortunate positions, and they're coming with questions, and they want to know, well, when's our job? And as a PTA, there's also funding considerations. If our school's going to be closed, like, how are we going to raise money the following year? How are we going to, there's so much unknown. So just kind of being mindful about that timeline and communicating that to people, I think, is really important. Lastly, I would say that our enrollment probably is down right now because families, every family that has come for a tour is concerned about the school closure. And so I would like for the district to consider extending the magnet program enrollment deadline, knowing that people are very concerned about registering for something that might not be there, might not be underneath that roof. They don't want to start and then be gone. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I will keep it brief. I was taking a lot of notes, and I had a prepared speech, but then I just realized you'd read the emails. You have really given a lot of thought. So I just thought maybe some actionable recommendations might be helpful at this time of the night. So Superintendent Trice, you've mentioned that maybe we're not really focusing on the programs. As you've heard, there's a lot of programming that parents, families, teachers are really worried about. I wonder if we could separate out the conversation a little bit, since we're talking about facilities closing, but if we could talk about the STEAM program, Mandarin immersion programs, other programs that are very important to communities, maybe on a different note, on a different, that would be really helpful, because I know that that is a particular concern for Glenwood. There were examples mentioned from Wake County and Guilford. I think that would be really helpful to see how they have gone through redistricting as well as consolidating schools, since those are two action items that we are both looking at. And those are our neighboring counties with not similar demographics, but obviously they are neighbors, so it'd be good to see that data. It's already been mentioned, but as you see, even the transparent process of understanding what the process is, understanding what is going to go into the criteria. I know you can't look at a million data points, but you can look at a subset of them, and even understanding why some were chosen over others, I think would be really important to the community. I really want to echo Board Member Ronnie's suggestion to give it time. I know that there's a timeline, there are budget considerations, and I'm not saying give it a year. Really, though, a few months I think would be probably not sufficient for a comprehensive study to be done. Given that, I was, and I know there's budget concerns, but if an independent entity could do the study, that would also be valuable as well. And also get a bigger room next time. Thanks.
So I'm sorry so late. Okay, so I'm a parent of a first grader at Glenwood. I'm a new family. So here, my son chose Glenwood just because of the immersion program and the STEAM program. So my family moved from Boston last summer. So the only reason is because this program. Before I chose the school, I did a lot of research. Cary, Raleigh, Guilford counties, Chapel Hill, Durham. And then finally, so I chose here, Glenwood Elementary School. And then now my husband and I have to commute to Greensboro every day for 1 hour for what? Just because of this school. And then why Glenwood is special? So in the U.S., there are 396 Mandarin immersion programs in the United States, and then there are 17 Mandarin immersion programs in North Carolina, and then 2 in Chapel Hill, Glenwood and the Phillips. So what makes Chapel Hill unique, special, right? Think about our special programs. This is very important. How we attract new families moving to Chapel Hill, not Cary, not Durham. So please consider about it. Thank you.
Anna Delatorre, parent of 3, one at Glenwood in 2nd grade. First off, I want to say thank you all for your service. I know this is not easy, giving to the community, something clearly we all care about very much as well, too, so thank you very much. I just want to point out some data. Looked at the Woolport report. In addition to just looking at which schools were recommended for closure, also looked at the column that showed the 10-year expected maintenance costs of the 3 that were originally being considered. Glenwood has the lowest of those 3. Older doesn't necessarily equal worse facilities. There's lots of older houses that go for millions of dollars in Chapel Hill that are from the 1950s. It really is a beautiful campus. I was amazed by all the windows when I moved here. I came from Florida. These schools are amazing in comparison. And our school has history. In addition, look at test scores. Not only do we have the highest test scores, some of the highest test scores across the district, but we have the highest test scores across the board. So we're doing well for not only our most privileged students, we're also doing well for our historically less privileged students, those who are economically disadvantaged, as well as historically, racially as well. So our school really is succeeding, and it's an amazing community, and the programs work really well together. And in some ways, it's nice that it's not a neighborhood school, that we get people from all over the county. We don't know if someone has a $2 million house. We just know that we all care about our school, and I think that really does create a beautiful population. I'd also like to say I appreciate the speed. I think the sooner we can make a decision, the sooner our community can accept it and really start to heal, because this has already started to break our community apart. So thank you very much.
Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Trice. My name is Georgette Dent. I'm a faculty member in pathology and laboratory medicine at the UNC School of Medicine. And I'm here because I have a grandkid who is at Glenwood in the Mandarin program. And I just have to tell you, I can't say enough good things about that program. That program, it is part of the future. We know that 1 in 5 human beings on Earth is Chinese. We know that China is going to have the largest economy in the world in 10 years or so. And you've heard some of the other comments from the families here. Our kids, because of the neuroplasticity of the brain, they have a window of time where they can learn languages and become fluent. And we have to take advantage of that. So I'm here to advocate for Glenwood and for the Mandarin language program. I feel the same way about the Spanish language program. There's not a day that goes by that I don't wish that my Spanish was better. All I can do is conjugate verbs. I never did learn how to speak or talk very well, but what can you say? So as you consider this, please consider maintaining this program. It is special. It is unique. It is important. It is the future. It is a model for America. So please consider that. And full disclosure, I do have a biracial grandkid. And for my little grandkid to be able to talk to his Chinese grandma during the break, there's no words for that. So please, as you consider this, and let me tell you, it's a nightmare. I was an administrator for a while. And you're making me very happy. I'm no longer an administrator. What you're doing is very hard, and I know you're well-meaning. But please, these programs, the importance of these language programs cannot be overstated for the future of our children. It actually makes you smarter to learn foreign languages. So we got to capitalize on that. So thank you all. God bless you. This is hard work. Hang in there.
Well, thank you. That was a hard act to follow. First of all, thank you so much. We recognize you guys are volunteers, and you're here late, so we appreciate that. My name is Mark Shen. My wife Audrey and I moved here 12 years ago. We have a kindergartner, a very precocious little girl, and a fourth grader, our son. So we're heavily invested in Glenwood and its dual language programs. Our niece also. So we have 3 family members. Professionally, Audrey runs a nonprofit for kids with autism, and I'm a professor at the School of Medicine working with kids with developmental disabilities. And I just wanted to make the case that we talked a lot about cutting costs, but what we haven't talked about is increasing revenue, like the other side of this economic problem. And revenue, of course, is tied to enrollment. And in November, Dr. Trice sent an email sharing really helpful data from the board about these enrollment trends. And that was very helpful. And what we're talking about really is an economic issue and financial stability, and it's driven by enrollment. So as we know, enrollment is down, not just because of birth rates are down, which is true, but also that like affordability here is becoming harder. But in the families who can actually afford to move here, there's a trend where they are older and their kids are older, so that their children are not matriculating to kindergarten to drive those numbers that we just saw. So it's a subset of people who can afford to live here. They're not having kids who are then entering kindergarten. And this is your data that you shared in November, Dr. Trice. The third part of it is that those who can afford to live here and do have kindergartners here, they're sending their kids to private schools. And their enrollments, like business is good for the private schools. So what the point is that Glenwood is a value add for the school district. There's a reason why the Glenwood enrollment has not dipped, if you noticed, and that we're at 95% capacity. So I appreciate that consideration, and thank you for your service.
Hi, folks. I'm Amber May Scott Brown. I'm the parent of 2 children at Ephesus. I have a child in Head Start and a child in kindergarten. Just really want to say thank you to the folks that are giving your full attention to the community speakers. I think that's highly valued. I have a daughter that has Down syndrome. She's in the Head Start program at Ephesus. We actually started out in a different school within the district. We sought out Ephesus. We came, we toured Ephesus, spoke with Dr. Sturman, who gave us a personal tour of the building, who ensured us that our child would get the attention that she needs and the community that she needs. My first grader also transitioned over. They are getting better care, better attention, and they are thriving in the Ephesus community and not getting the attention that they got in another school, quote unquote, the best elementary school in this district. We bought our house in the Ephesus School District, specifically sought this out. So when you say things like, it's not personal, it's very personal. And I think you need to look at the people in this room who all showed up here tonight, because it is very personal. It was not shared with us that school closures were going to be on the bond. That is not what we voted for. You need to reconsider. You need to be transparent. Thank you.
Yes, Saber. You guys hear me? Okay. Sure. Members of the board, thank you for your service and time.
I'm Sarah Abrahams of Chapel Public School parent, a PTA member, and a graduate of Chapel High School. My family's been invested in this district for over 30 years, and I returned as a parent because of what the system represents. What brings me here tonight is not advocacy, but concern about process integrity and sequencing before irreversible decisions are made. At the end of the last meeting which I attended, the district appeared to be moving from a facilities-driven analysis directly to a narrow list of 3 schools. That sequencing is of concern. A facilities assessment developed for capital planning and bond modeling is not in itself a closure study. A closure study results in board-defined criteria and scope before analysis begins. The school board statute is intentionally broad. That breadth should not be used to justify narrowing scope early. It places responsibility on the board to define and apply best practice criteria before options are limited. Before narrowing the list, the board needs 2 things in place: a board-approved specific criteria matrix applied consistently across all schools under discussion, and a clear process roadmap showing how decisions are made and by whom. This is not about slowing things down. It's about aligning first on criteria, process, and facts so that any decision is defensible, student-centered, and protects the integrity of the district. Thank you.
I'm here to speak on behalf of my passion for Ephesus, like many of our community members here tonight. My son is a 2nd grader at Ephesus. He's one of the 100 daily walkers, which is a data point that our community has generated. And I have 2 hopefully rising road runners that'll be 100 and 101. I'm also an immediate neighbor to the school. And additionally, I attended Ephesus as a child in the 90s. I also went to Sewell for a couple of years, so I have an appreciation for the breadth of amazing education that happens at the district. Thank you for the thoughtful discussion tonight and reopening consideration of FPG and Estes in this conversation. It felt disingenuous to not include all 5 schools, as many people have told you very eloquently. Schools are not buildings. You know, it's been said a couple of times. It's a building. It's not a building. It doesn't matter how, we don't care how shiny the building is. We want it to be safe and comfortable and facilitate learning, but it doesn't need to be shiny and have the latest technology for the kids to feel good. The teachers make the kids feel good. All of these teachers that came here tonight after work, you know, for hours and hours with their children, you know, to show you how much we care about the community. It's not just a building. As a parent, I can tell you the school is thriving. My son is thriving because of Ephesus. He has the most incredible teachers, peers, professionals that support him. You've heard all the reasons. And the teachers are happy. This is so important. You just said retention is the new recruitment. That's what we need here. Retention is the new recruitment. And you're going to hear a lot from the Ephesus community in the next, several months about other points. And I also just want to mention that I'm concerned that closure of Ephesus in this, within the walk zone, the very tight community you've heard about, would cause a lot of families to leave the public education system, which is something we've talked about. There are many families that have the option to pursue private school, and they would prefer to have a public education for their children. And a lot of ground was lost during COVID, but momentum is strong at Ephesus, and closing thriving schools is exactly what will drive more families to choose alternative options.
Hi, thank you for doing all the hard work that you are all doing without getting paid for it. But we really, really appreciate that you are all here and putting so much thought into this. I am a parent of, my name is Shabbar Rana Purwala. I'm a faculty member at UNC. My wife is also an educator. at UNC. We have a kindergartner at Ephesus Elementary. I moved to this country 18 years ago, and back before that, when I was in India, I had a very tight-knit community. For 18 years, I've moved in the United States to many different states. And in 2017, we came to Chapel Hill and found our home in this neighborhood. We had no idea how good Ephesus was at that time because we didn't have kids. Fast forward to last year's summer, our daughter started, the moms group, which all the moms are here, they started a group and started getting the kids together. And even through all those years, we probably knew the neighbors on our street and the neighbors on the street parallel to us. But now, through this going to school, walking to school every day, we know pretty much everybody in the neighborhood, or at least a lot more people, and the teachers, and the crossing guard. In this time that I didn't have community for so many years, in the past 1 year, finally I felt like I have a community again. And that has been phenomenal. So you see the community here today showing up, and everybody saying the same thing. It's not the building that makes the school, it's the community that makes the school. And that's the community that showed up. That's the community you need to think about in a time when, there is so much divisiveness across the country. These are the things that we need to preserve. Thank you.
I want to start by thanking the board and Dr. Trice for being proactive in order to best serve our students. I moved here from a community where they needed to close schools and they didn't want to, and that's part of why we left that community, because it put the district in such a financial hole. I am a PhD in sociology, and I am not here to talk about specific buildings or specific programs. I know that this is going to impact every single elementary school student. My child will be going into 5th grade the year this redistricting happens. We don't know if he will go to 5th grade at the school he is zoned for. It is not on the list, but that doesn't make a difference. It puts uncertainty everywhere, but it's okay if it's for a better shared future than everybody losing their teaching assistants, because it could impact even more kids if we don't do that. We already drive past a school to get to our zoned elementary school because of the oddities of how our district works. And that's okay, because my child gets to attend a vibrant school community that is racially and economically diverse, that includes newcomers, and has an EC program. He gets to experience this amazing diversity. But I came here really tonight to talk about the criteria that you are going to use for consolidation. And it's not about my kid. I want to strongly urge you to minimize the impact on our most marginalized student populations. I want you to really think about historically underserved neighborhoods. I want you to think about the history of our district and how we can, when we do this redistricting and all of these decisions, because they all go together, not impact those communities. It's about our larger district community. And it's also about maintaining our school staff and helping them find other positions in the district so that we can keep our talent serving our kids. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'm sorry. I'm not sick. I have really bad asthma right now. Thank you all for staying, listening, everybody in this room for coming. I am here as a professor at UNC, but I'm also here as an environmental anthropologist who studies decision-making, risk mitigation, and most importantly, how communities recover when they do have crises. Usually, I'm actually in this position talking to people whose school has washed away or burned down or exploded from a volcano. We're not in that situation. We aren't. We have the moment to make some choices, and it may take a little bit more time. I'm also here because I'm concerned about the very specific data set that you are using for these choices. I'm currently partnering with the town of Chapel Hill and the Chamber of Commerce, and I also serve on North Carolina's State Committee for Disaster Preparedness and Planning. We are trying to work together to make community and stakeholder-specific flood and disaster mitigation planning toolkits. There's a reason that your property taxes are more based on your land than the value of your building. If you go to my website, gayla'Oconnell.org, and go to my lab, you will see some images that I just pulled up. I didn't know about this, but I pulled up some images and just looked at some, made some quick GIS maps. And the thing is, if you don't also consider the geophysical location, the elevation, the proximity to extreme heat, to corridors, all of those things, then you're not actually following the mandate of the state or the town, because we have to be planning for the future, not just mitigating this moment's crisis. And the piece of that matters most is this is also an opportunity. This is an opportunity for our district to make plans about positive, forward-thinking, act differently, think differently schools. And I have a lot of other ideas.
Okay, so that was everyone who signed up. And then Brian. Yeah, so Brian, are you okay if we go ahead and open it up to anyone who didn't sign up? Are you fine? Okay, I just want to make sure because you said you wanted to go last, so thank you. Please state your name, okay?
My name is Denis Kiktev, and I'm a parent of a second grader at Ephesus Elementary. And I came here to hear the discussion about the decision to be made about which schools to be rebuilt and which will be closed. But apparently, at least some members of the board have already made this decision. And my question is, how? Because today is February 5th. This document which you distributed specifically says that this board will establish the criteria to be used on February 19th. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Sternbach-Elkins. I would just like to speak briefly. I grew up in this town. I went to all of my schooling in this town, as did my husband. I went to Estes Hills, actually. It doesn't matter, but I just have to speak. This is all of our towns. It's all of our town. I don't like being that we're pitted against each other. I understand the situation that we're in now, but I think it's very valuable for everyone who's in this town. 20 years down the road, we know which schools there are, the same way 20 years ago what schools were here, that we're all in this kind of, we go through this together and we have this list. I really appreciate you considering the list of more schools so we can just get to the bottom of that. And I have to say, I came back here. I lived in Denver for 8 years, and I moved back. That school system was very different, very hard. I worked with tons of school systems in Denver. I knew my mom had always told me the school system was amazing, and I really believe it, and I see it, and I moved back to have my family here. So please consider all of the schools. Thank you.
All right. I'm so sorry. I know we're all so tired. I didn't sign up to speak because, quite honestly, I've had sick kids for the last week. My friend died today, and I didn't want to be here, and I still showed up because I love our community of Glenwood so much. We talk about equity in our school system. I have 3 children. I have a 4th grader, I have a 1st grader, and I have a 3-year-old that's in preschool that wants to go to Glenwood because his brothers love it so much. My husband and I grew up in Chicago in a really diverse area. And when we moved to North Carolina, I said 1 year, and then we're out. And then we fell in love, and we started to try to decide where we should plant our feet. And we looked at Durham initially. And then we got swayed because people said, well, Chapel Hill Carborough school system is way better. And there is so much that's wonderful here, but I think that quite honestly, and I don't know if I'm doing this politically correctly or not, but I think that there's a huge amount of racial bias in that, and that people are realizing that, which is why more and more people are going to Durham and recognizing the value of their school system. And more people are going to Chatham County and recognizing their amazing school system. And I ask you to think about, as Mark did, what is going to bring value to Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools moving forward. And part of that is diversity, and part of that is equity in how children learn differently. And a variety of programming speaks to different kids' needs, and having a program like Glenwood that offers a STEAM program and offers a language component is drawing people to our school district. And I don't think it's just my family. And I think it is a beautiful thing that even though almost none of us are in the walk zone, we still find community. Our kids still are bonded. Our families get together and do play dates, and grandparents come and plant flowers in our garden, and parents come to the school and have lunch with their kids all together. And what I have not heard in any of this, and maybe I'm missing something, is I have not heard anyone address if these special programs that bring communities together are going to exist if we close facilities.
Thank you. Can I get your name as well?
I'm so sorry. Megan Seaver.
Thank you, Megan.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Let's see. I'm trying to type.
Hi, I'm Miriam Viberg.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm from Ephesus. I just moved here to Chicago. You guys all got my letter that stated my emotional why with what I believe are hard rationale of why I did my research and came to this school. One thing that I just have to point out, because as a data person, it's eating me, is you guys are throwing around a number of a research that you did for close to $6 million on Carborough School, and then you're comparing that same $6 million, and now I'm shaking, I have to pull up my list, sorry. For saving a school that's going to be the same amount of money. So basically you're going to save $6 million saving a school. That's $6 million that you spent in architectural plans and designs. So I just don't understand, and I really hope that when the criteria comes back in a few months or in a few weeks, because I know we're pushing to go fast here, how is $6 million of closing a school comparable to the $6 million that you've already sunk into doing research for Carborough? It's just not adding up in my head. And I think if you take a second look at the data that so many people here are requesting on all of these schools, we can actually see what you're talking about. So thank you for that consideration.
Anyone else before Mr. Link comes up? Thank you, Brian, for being kind with our community members.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, Madam Chair, I'd like the privilege to be able to speak not only on behalf of the organization, but then to take my personal speaking time just to make sure that I can finish this statement. So thank you. I know.
4 minutes.
I understand. We will be done before 4, but I want to make sure that it's here, and I'll tell you exactly why. Good evening. My name is Brian Link, and I'm the president of the Chapel Hill Carborough Association of Educators. And the statement I'm about to deliver tonight was first developed in our AR meeting in January, and asking individuals who represented our elementary schools about what they were facing and what it is that they wanted to have communicated this evening. It was then brought before our executive board and discussed further there, including representatives from our elementary schools there, and then sent to every single member of our union who is an elementary school member for them to provide feedback. And so in addition to the comments tonight, I will provide any additional thoughts that folks have that they were submitting up until 3 p.m. today. And so I'm here tonight to say the following things. 1, the heart of the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools has always and will always be its people, our amazing students, our dedicated colleagues, and thank you. thank you so much for being here this evening. And our stalwart families who support public education at its very best, thank you. No matter what happens going forward, we need to remember we, the people, working together are what makes our schools great. We know the road before us is challenging, and we know what the problems are that we need to solve. The question is, what pathway are we going to take? I'm not here to divide folks tonight. I represent everyone in this district. We cannot be divided. We have to work together. So I'm not here to argue the merits of one school over the other. There are great merits in cases you've heard all around. I'm asking you to consider three things. One, as you've heard tonight, our students, staff, and families need clarity and certainty. A school closing is not only a huge undertaking, it is also a traumatic event. The sooner we can prepare our kids and their caregivers, both in schools and at home, of what will transpire, the better off we all psychologically will be. And we know if we do not take action that we are going to face another rift. And that simply cannot happen. Our people are at the heart of Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools. Second, as you've heard tonight, the administration and board need to make decisions based on data that is clearly communicated to all impacted. Show the work, outline the utilization rates, demonstrate the savings that are expected, and make sure that your decision is transparent. We all need and have to buy into a path forward, as hard as it might be. And we believe that the heart of CHCCS, its students, families, and staff can do that if the case presented is valid and reliable. Finally, our community needs to see the forest as well as the trees. We need to know where we are going, not just what we're pivoting from, but what we're pivoting toward, so that the trade-offs and opportunity costs can be properly evaluated. And we need to, as Ms. Feaster-Fornville has said, be ready if necessary to save the mementos and histories at sites left behind that the heart of CCHS has created over decades so that future generations can be reminded about why our mission and our people are so important and will continue to be the lifeblood that sustains the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools from one generation to the next. We cannot be divided. Do right by our people tonight, and they will continue to fill our community with excellence and with equity for years to come. Collective action, engagement, social justice demands nothing less. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me, I do not have the same social capital as Mr. Link, but I would also now like to speak as a parent of children in the district, in the elementary school. I have something different to say.
Excuse me, hold on, excuse me. So Mr. Link represents an organization.
Yes, and then he
reserved.
himself.
Yes, and so we have organizations, the teacher, so we've got our CAE, our SIT, and then our student organizations. It doesn't mean like you work for UNC or things like that.
But I came for the flood task force of the entire community.
That is not what we recognize as one of our recognized groups,
I understand
unfortunately.
that. Thank you for
so
explaining.
much. Yeah.
I'm deeply concerned that there's been no conversation of what happens next to the middle school or the high schools, the demographics.
Be respectful of all the people who've been sitting here waiting. These are teachers and families. They have to get up in the morning. Please, just be respectful.
Thank you. I'm looking around the room, making sure there's no other public comments. Okay. With that, we're going to close our public comment for this work session item.